distinguished guests, and our esteemed panelists. This morning, I wish to bid you welcome to today's Tobago Blue Heritage Symposium, a prestigious event brought to you by the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries, and this is a department under the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development. We have gathered today to celebrate Tobago's rich blue heritage as we commemorate the significance of this coastal paradise. This morning's proceedings is open. We have begun officially, and I wish to also acknowledge those attendants that have joined us via Zoom, as well as those who are streaming live. I wish to now invite you all to stand together as we play the national anthem. And I wish that you would remain standing for the prayer, which would follow soon after. Thank you. I now invite to the lectern Mr. Willard Adams to do the prayer.
Let us bow our heads and raise our hearts and minds to our God. We gather in this time and in this place in thanksgiving. Thanksgiving that this omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent God, who had spared our lives to see another day, another year to celebrating His majesty and His creation. You created us, our families, and all with whom make up our lives. Thank you, Lord. You created all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful. You, the Lord God, made them all. Creator, you designed the seas, its waves crashing along our shores, and we become enthralled by their power and grace, marveling at creatures miraculous in color, moving swiftly through its waters. Father God, you, the maker of the tides, reminding us of the interconnection of our world, and that you are near, you are never far from our presence. Our oceans contains the bulk of our planet's water supply and most of the variety of living creatures. Many threatened for all sorts of reasons. It's either we are not aware of it or we don't want to take responsibility. We fail many times to recognize that one of every 2 breaths we take is thanks to the oceans. Tons of plastic being removed from our oceans around our world reminds us of our carelessness. Help us, Lord, to recognize this could be the death of all of us and every living being on our planet. The truth, O God, is as brutal as that. Help us to recognize that creation is a project of love, of the love God gives to humanity. We pray as we celebrate World Oceans Day, politicians, scientists, economists, and all persons whose livelihood depends on the health of our oceans, those who fish the waters for food and nutrients, and those whose culture and spirituality are entwined with the ocean and its mysteries, will feel called to discern their role in protecting our oceans, and have that each of us feel a renewed sense, help each of us to have a renewed sense of connection with the ocean and its many gifts to us. We pray that Tobago and all other islands would seek out programs to encourage and promote the health of our oceans, hoping to leave this wonderful creation a mystery to behold for all future generations. And all of God's people say, amen, amen, and amen.
I invite you to have your seats. Thank you. Throughout the months of May and June 2023, a series of remarkable events have been organized to pay homage to the wonders of Tobago's marine environment. And at the heart of these celebrations lies this symposium, a pinnacle occasion where we delve into the critical issues concerning the protection and conservation of our crown jewel, the Buccoo Reef Marine Park. And I know that all of us are familiar with the Buccoo Reef Marine Park. The importance of the Buccoo Reef Marine Park cannot be overstated. This symposium aims to shine a spotlight on the park's exceptional beauty and ecological significance. Our discussions will revolve around the challenges and solutions in safeguarding this remarkable ecosystem, as well as the socio-economic considerations that must be taken into account. Distinguished experts and stakeholders from various fields have been invited to share their invaluable insights, knowledge, and experiences with us this morning. Together, we will explore best practices and innovative approaches in co-management arrangements, emphasizing the need for multiple stakeholders coming together to collaborate to preserve the pristine condition of the Buccoo Reef Marine Protected Area. In this symposium, we will tackle a range of topics, including the socioeconomic dynamics of effective management, the ecological considerations that shape our decision-making, and the strategies for ensuring the long-term resilience of this precious marine treasure. By exploring these subjects, we aim to generate meaningful discourse that will guide us towards a sustainable and prosperous future for our marine protected area. And we know that the Buccoo Reef Marine Park is the only marine protected area in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, let us come together as a community passionate about our blue heritage to exchange ideas, engage in insightful conversations, and collectively forge a path towards a brighter future for Tobago's marine resources. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all our partners and participants who have contributed to the success of this symposium. Without further ado, let us embark on this enlightening journey together. Welcome to the Tobago Blue Heritage Symposium. I now invite Mr. Garth Utley, Director of the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries, to bring greetings this morning.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Tobias. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed participants, I'm standing here this morning and at times the emotions tend to take me over. When I look here, I'm seeing persons who I am very familiar with and persons who the department would have worked with for a number of years. So I'm feeling good. At the same time, I'm feeling a bit emotional. It's an honor to stand here before you today representing the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries. I must extend, on behalf of the administrator and the Assistant Secretary with responsibility for the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries, greetings. Unfortunately, they are engaged in other activities this morning. On behalf of the department, again, I want to say my warmest greetings to all of us. Now, this symposium serves as a testimony to our unwavering commitment and to preserve and conserve Tobago's blue heritage. As we gathered here to discuss the critical issues surrounding the Buccoo Reef Marine Park, I am filled with a profound sense of pride in our collective decision to safeguard our national treasure. The Buccoo Reef Marine Park holds a special place in our hearts, not only for its beauty, and I know persons may say, they may compare the present Buccoo Reef Park to back then, and they may say, so you saying beauty? Look back then, it was beautiful then. But also for its ecological importance and the multitude of livelihood it supports. Today we come together as visionaries, experts, and stakeholders to chart a sustainable path forward, one that would ensure continued prosperity of this remarkable marine ecosystem for generations to come. I want to express as well my gratitude to the staff of the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries, Mr. Barry Lovelace, Mr. Tobias, I'm seeing the Reef Patrol officers at the back, and all those participants for organizing this symposium. Your tireless efforts and commitment to promoting the blue heritage of Tobago have made this event possible. I'm confident that the discussions held here will foster innovative ideas, meaningful collaborations, and transformative solutions. Let us embrace the opportunity to engage in fruitful dialogue, share our knowledge, and work hand in hand towards a future where the Buccoo Reef Marine Park flourishes under our stewardship. I have great faith in the collective wisdom present here today. Together, let us harness the power of our shared vision to protect and preserve Tobago's blue heritage, ensuring that it remains a source of pride, inspiration, and prosperity for our world and nation. May this symposium be a success. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garth Utley, for bringing us greetings this morning. And I wish that we all really participate and really take charge of these discussions, because at the end of today, we hope that we would be able to make considerable grounds in the sustainable management of our marine resources. Thanks again, Mr. Garth Utley. At this point in time, I wish to invite Mr. Barry Lovelace, who is going to bring us some remarks, as well as to introduce the main aspect of this morning's proceedings. Mr. Lovelace, please welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you, Esther. Good morning, everyone. All right, and I have to say friends, a lot of friends here, and colleagues, and so on. Now, thank you all for accepting the invitation to come this morning. And so, we are here at the picturesque Pigeon Point Heritage, and I stress Heritage Park. You know, we have the pavilion here, and we have as the backdrop our ocean. Well, I put up a curtain there, but if it were not there, we'll be seeing the ocean. And I'm sure if you stretch your ears a little bit, you'll hear the soothing songs of waves. You know, those waves are reminding us of the importance of our oceanic heritage. Now, our purpose here this morning is to delve into crucial issues surrounding the socioeconomics and the ecological considerations, as well as multi-stakeholder co-management arrangements for the Buccoo Reef Marine Park. And you know, the Buccoo Reef Marine Park stands as our flagship blue resource. And it's a true gem to us. Now, with the theme we have selected, Celebrating Our Blue Heritage, this symposium aims to bring together experts, as there are many here, stakeholders, and passionate individuals who have devoted themselves to the preservation and sustainable management of our marine environment. Now, today, the primary format is via panel discussion, and it provides a platform for in-depth conversations, for in-depth insights and recommendations from our esteemed panelists who possess diverse backgrounds and expertise. Now, it's a two-part discussion that we'll be engaging in, and I want to point out that there are different audiences, or we have here the in-person, we call them the in-person panelists. We also have on Zoom, or Zoom panelists, those who are joining us remotely. And of course, we have you here, or in-person stakeholders, but we are also streaming live via Tobago Updates and via the division's webpage, Facebook page. And so we have that audience as well. So there are various, so don't feel too alone, all right? Now, during part one of our panel discussion, we will explore the socio-economic activities taking place within the Buccoo Reef Marine Park. We look at the challenges the challenges as it pertains to marine space planning or zoning or lack thereof. User conflicts, I'm sure you've been hearing of those lately, as well as the crucial role of maritime services and the police service and so on. We also would like to hear a little bit about the Marine Bill, the Tobago Marine Parks Bill, or even the environmentally sensitive areas designation. What's happening there? Our panelists represent various sectors, and they will shed light on these significant aspects, fostering a deeper understanding of the intricate dynamics involved. When we move to part 2 of our discussion, we want to shift our focus to considerations for multi-stakeholder co-management arrangements. In this segment, we want to emphasize the importance of collaboration, inclusivity, and the harmonization of conservation and tourism objectives within the Buccoo Reef Marine Park. Our panelists will share their expertise on effective management practices, probably looking at successful case studies. There are many successful case studies right in our region, right? And probably make recommendations for establishing a dedicated entity to oversee the sustainable management of our prized resource. Throughout this panel discussion, we encourage open exchange. We want to hear your ideas, your insights, your experiences. Our goal is not only to address the challenges, but also to identify actionable solutions and foster a sense of shared responsibility towards the protection and preservation of the Buccoo Reef Marine Park. And even broader, we have space side too, but we want to keep the discussion focused today. So we're talking Buccoo, right? Now, as moderator, myself and Ms. Esther, Tobias Clark, we are honored to facilitate this discussion and guide our esteemed panelists through thoughtful questions and engaging dialogue. Together, let us seize this opportunity to deepen our understanding, inspire collaborative action, and reaffirm our commitment to safeguarding our precious Buccoo Reef. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to you. I eagerly anticipate the insightful conversation and a productive discussion. So thank you on that aspect. Now, I want to introduce the panelists. All right, so as I made mention earlier, we have our in-house or in-person panelists. And we have it here, I think, in alphabetical order, but I call it as it is here. So we have Mr. Alvin Douglas, Frontier Dive, right? And he's in the private sector, right? And I think he could speak on behalf of or represent the Dive Association as well, yeah? We also have Mr. Dexter Blacks. He's a reef tour operator, right? In the middle there, again, private sector. Right? I saw Mr. Gerald McFarlane. Mr. Gerald McFarlane should be at the table here, man. Just bring the chair and put it somewhere there, right? So you have Mr. Gerald McFarlane of Buccoo Reef Trust, representing the civil society. We also have Mr. Lindford Beckers at the end there, right? Mr. Beckers will wave. You're on camera, you know. All right, so you have Mr. Lindford Beckers, who is the director of the Department of the Environment, THA. We also have Mr. Ricardo Alfred, Maritime Surveyor with the Ministry of Transport. Well, he's a man who has several hats, right? But he's wearing that hat this morning. So, Mr. Alfred, welcome. And we also have Ms. Shariza Yakub, Product Development Specialist with the Division of Tourism, Tobago House of Assembly. Right? So those are our in-house panelists. On Zoom, we also have experts there who will be contributing. I think the technologists will have them flash their cameras while they're introduced, I think. We'll see. So we have Mr. Alyosha Watke, who is the CEO of Environmental Research Institute of Charlottesville, civil sector. We have Dr. Anjani Ganes, a marine scientist with the Institute of Marine Affairs. We have Dr. Potts, marine scientist with the University of Trinidad and Tobago. We also have online there Acting Commissioner of Police, Mr. Collis Hazel, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We also have Dr. Farlane Solomon, a fisheries scientist with the IMA. And we have as well Dr. Rahana Juman. He's the director of the Institute of Marine Affairs. Where we also expect Ms. Patricia Turpin. I didn't see her on when I last looked, but we expect Ms. Patricia Turpin to come in as well. And she's the chairman of the Tobago Alliance for Resilient Communities, civil sector. So there we have it, a lineup of competent persons. So I want to start the ball rolling with the panel, get into the discussion. And I want to start with two persons. That's Dr. Juman and Mr. Beckles, right? So, Dr. Juman, can you provide us an overview of the historical, give us a historical context, the laws and so forth that apply to the management of the Buccoo Reef Marine Park, and what are the purpose of these instruments that have been put in place, right? We have the Marine Preservation Act, we have the ESA designation, we have the Marine Parks Bill, right? And, well, of course, Mr. Linford, you could follow up in that conversation, right? Dr. Juman, are you there? I will soon move this podium and go to the table such that we can have a more relaxed conversation, but we'll start up.
Okay.
Yes, you can just test
So are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you fine.
Okay. So way back in 1967, Thomas Goro, who was a well-known marine scientist, described Buccoo Reef and the Bonaccord Lagoon as a single ecosystem, which is unique in the Eastern Caribbean for its biological richness, beauty, and accessibility. Both Goro and scientists from the FAO recommended that this ecosystem complex be designated a marine park. Based on these recommendations, Buccoo Reef was declared a restricted area in 1973 under the Marine Area Preservation and Enhancement Act, Chapter 37.02 of 1970. And the reason for that, it was because it felt it was necessary to preserve and enhance the natural beauty of such areas, protect the flora and fauna of such areas, promote the enjoyment by the public, and promote scientific study and research in respect of such areas. Since the 1970s, though, major development issues have surrounded this ecosystem, as there has been rapid infrastructural development in Southwest Tobago to accommodate, of course, the hotel and the tourism sector. And from the 2000 population census, the population density surrounding this area was reported as 201 to 400 persons per square kilometer. Now, associated with population increases and build development is the problem of land-based sources of pollution, particularly sewage pollution, which negatively impacts on the
Recording in
ecosystem.
progress.
The Tobago House of Assembly recognized that the increasing build development in the southwestern part of the island would negatively impact on the ecosystem complex and invested money and human resources in trying to manage Buccoo Reef. In 1994, the IMA, in conjunction with the THA, formulated a management plan for Buccoo Reef. Some of the recommendations proposed for rehabilitating the reef include the demarcation of Buccoo Reef using marker buoys so that people will know when they are within the marine protected area, installation of permanent mooring for anchoring of boats. As you know, we have glass bottom boats that operate in the area, taking tourists there, so they need to moor those boats. Control of land-based runoff in the marine environment. Appointment of a park manager to carry out day-to-day administration of the proposed park, and an introduction of a permit system for those wishing to undertake approved activities in the park. The first recommendation that was implemented was the hiring of a park manager back around, I think, 1993 or 1994, and he would have resigned in 1998, and that position was not filled until much later down. Now, in 2005, the Buccoo Reef Lagoon was actually designated a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention because of its rich biological diversity and the fact that it was a habitat for threatened and endangered species, right? And the intent of having it declare a wetland of international importance was we felt that it would bring attention towards the management of the park. Now, in 2004, just before that, the Environmental Management Authority, together with the THA, took the initiative to have Buccoo Reef Lagoon declared an environmentally sensitive area under the Environmentally Sensitive Area Rule 2001. A committee was established by the EMA in conjunction with the THA in 2004 to oversee the establishment of this ESA. And the committee comprised government agencies, CBOs, and NGOs. And among the members were the THA, the EMA, the IMA, Environment Tobago, Buccoo Reef Trust, the Buccoo Reef Tour Operators, the Southwest Fishing Association, Coast Guard, and the Police Service. Now, that initiative to have Buccoo Reef declare an ESA never happened. I don't think it was never declared an ESA. There was plans, and even later on, the management committee met for many years. The management committee was an advisory committee. Implementation had to be with the Tobago House of Assembly. So it wasn't that the committee had much power. We were just advisory. Back in, I think, around 2011, 2012, we actually prepared, with members of the committee, prepared a proposal to develop the Buccoo Reef as a special purpose company, to develop a company to manage the Buccoo Reef. That too did not go any further. Now, with regards to the existing legislation, I know that there is proposed legislation, and I guess they're going to talk about that later on. But in terms of the existing legislation, the Marine Preservation and Enhancement Act of 1970, and as earlier said by Esther, Buccoo Reef remains the only marine protected area in Trinidad and Tobago under that legislation. When that legislation was actually drafted, back then, the THA Act did not exist, right? So there was, in the Marine Preservation and Enhancement Act, they talk about the minister with responsibility. So defining that minister. So it had to be clear who was going to have that function. I know that function, as it is right now, rests with the Department of Fisheries and Marine Resource, but it wasn't cleared as per the Act. And I guess some of that would be clarified now with regards to the new bill. The other thing that was needed amendment in terms of the legislation was the schedule of order statement, dense and along the high water mark, and including the mangrove forest bordering the Bonaccord Lagoon and its environment. That was sort of ambiguous, since the mangroves are dynamic ecosystem and may occur above the high water mark. And back then there was no consideration of climate change or sea level rise. And what we have now is mangroves, because of sea level rise and so forth, actually expanding landward. So that whole there was ambiguity with regards to the boundary that needed to also be addressed. I know when they were declaring the ESA, there was some surveying and so forth that were done, and proposals were made as to different boundary for the ESA, but as I said, those things never went forward. In terms of management of the Buccoo Reef, even when IMA did the management plan, the main concern was land-based sources of pollution, and that still exists today and remains a problem. One of the critical issues as well in terms of the management is also having the resources. So even when the Buccoo Reef Management Committee was operational, the major concern is that recommendations would have been made, but implementation would have had to be done by the THA, and there was always an issue with regards to resources, both human and financial resources to implement. So today we're not only dealing with things like human use of the environment and land-based sources of pollution, but we're also dealing with climate change, right, which we have very little control over, that impacts on our ecosystems. So, in moving forward, and IMA is starting this initiative in terms of doing any sort of rehabilitation work in Buccoo Reef, we need to build ocean stewardship. We need to have people engaged, take ownership, the stakeholders take ownership. This is their resource, and this is their resource to protect. So with that, I would pass over to Mr. Beckles. Thank you.
Yes, the microphone on Mr. Beckles there. And Mr. Beckles, I mean, she said a whole lot there, gave us a very good background in terms of the instruments and so on. But we're particularly curious as to the environmentally sensitive areas designation, as well as the Tobago Marine Parks bill. I think those two are still in train. What could you tell us? Well, just add some light to what's happening there.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Well, let me just first say that in the introductory remarks, both Barry and Esther referred to esteemed panelists. Well, I'm not really sure who they're talking about. That's the very first thing, because I think that many of the people who are seated on the other side can probably be reasonably referred to as experts. I mean, we have Taylor, there are the two Taylors, we have people like Derek and Day and so on who have already been involved in this thing for a very long time, and probably in a more intimate way than I have been. For example, I have not been to the beach in about 4 years. The last time I scuba dived was maybe about 12 years ago, right? So I'm not as intimately involved, but I probably would maybe wish to be considered as a stakeholder and so on, who can hopefully make some positive contributions to the discussions that we're really having. Now, with respect to the designation of the marine park as an environmentally sensitive area, I mean, Rana is quite correct. It's a process that started a very long time ago, around the time that I actually started working with the environment department at the Tobago House of Assembly. The marine park has not been designated as an environmentally sensitive area, and I know that one of the sticking points initially was that the Tobago House of Assembly was not happy with some of the landward boundaries. I think she mentioned the whole surveying process and so on, right? So the THA wasn't happy with some of the landward boundaries, and I think that maybe the THA might not have responded to the Environmental Management Authority. They might not have communicated their issues and so on. And essentially, I think that the process would have kind of died a natural death. Recently, there is a clearinghouse meeting that is hosted, that is co-chaired by the administrator with responsibility for the environment in Tobago, and the chairman of the Environmental Management Authority. And we had some discussions at that level. And I think that the THA has given a commitment to look at that, to look at the proposal again, with a view to moving the process forward, right? So that is where it is, right? That is as much as I know, and that is as much as I can say about that particular process. But the designation of any habitat as an environmentally sensitive area is something that is really, really important. And the designation is really to support environmentally sensitive species that depend on the conditions provided by that habitat in order for those species to thrive. All right? And that's essentially the thinking behind the designation of any area as an environmentally sensitive area. In addition to that, once you have an area that is designated as such, that area benefits from additional legal protections. Okay? So let us say, for example, the certificate of environmental clearance process. If you are to declare the marine park as an environmentally sensitive area, and you want to have a particular development, let's say a hotel development, I think that a lot of the environmental assessment that goes into that particular process is actually much more stringent. It's much more stringent and so on. So in that way, it provides additional protections. In addition to that, there are particular activities that would be outlawed and so on, right? Activities that are not necessarily compatible with sustainability. So there'll be restrictions in those things. Maybe restrictions on some recreational activities, probably restrictions on some economic activities and so on, right? Probably much in the same way that the Marine Park Bill proposes to do. So there'll be a lot of benefits coming out of that. A lot of potential benefits in terms of sustainability. But one of the things that we have to also be very honest about in Tobago and in Trinidad and Tobago at large is that we're very good at putting legislation in place. We are not very good at enforcing the legislation, right? So establishment of the legislation is just one step and so on. But to me, it's not even the most important step. We have to get ourselves in a place where we are able to kind of overcome the kind of cultural issues that we have with enforcing things and stuff, right? Like sometimes, I like to say, like in Tobago, we have a kind of poor boy kind of culture, right? So for example, if I know Bertil and so on, right, and Bertil might be involved in something not very sustainable and so on, right? I may have the legal responsibility to sort of, to prosecute Bertil, bring Bertil to justice and so on. But, the rest of the society and so on has influenced everybody, and people are saying, poor Bertil is a nice fella, watch him, So we have to kind of overcome some of these things. So those are some of the challenges that we really have in terms of the enforcement, right? And as I said, for me, the designation would be important, but the enforcement is even more important. In terms of the Marine Park Bill, Barry.
Yes.
The bill, I think it proposes to, in a nutshell, regulate activities within the boundaries of the park. And for convenience, probably two kinds of activities: recreational activities and some economic activities, particularly, fishing, spearfishing, those kind of things and so on. And of course, to establish zones where particular kinds of recreational activities are limited to. And this is a very important step, right? I always say that it is always better to have an imperfect plan than not to have any plan at all. And what we have right now, essentially, is no plan. Yeah. And we always have to keep in mind that any plan that we establish, the plan is never going to be perfect. So therefore, there's a requirement to make that plan reviewable over time and so on, right? So if you give a commitment to review the plan every 3 years, every 4, every 5 years and so on, I think that is something important, because the way we do things, they change all the time. And when we establish a plan in the context of the prevailing operating circumstances and so on. That might change with technology, it may change with with socioeconomics, it may change with all kinds of variables. So we have to ensure that whatever we establish, we know that it is something that is subject to change over time and so on. But what is also very important is that we have all stakeholders, having an influence on the policy positions, on the plans and so on that we come up with. Now, I work in the public sector, so I could criticize myself, right? It's very, very easy for me to do that. One of the issues that we have had over time and so on is that we say that we are including people and so on, and we want them to participate meaningfully. But that's not what we really want to do. We want to tell them what we want to do, right? And that's a fundamental problem that state agencies have, not only in this country, but in many other parts of the Caribbean where I've actually worked and so on, right? We want to say that we're consulting, but we're not really consulting. We want to tell people what we want to do. And I think that we have to change that. We have to change that mindset. Governments, state agencies, they never really want to give up control and so on. So we not only have to involve people in shaping the decisions that are going to affect their lives, but we also have to give them a stake in the management of whatever we come up with. Right? And I know that is going to represent a fundamental shift in the way that we do things, but we can't keep doing the same old things that don't work and expect different results. So we have to actually work to actually get there and so on. And that really requires a serious commitment to democratic ideals. It really, really requires that. So we essentially have to put our monies where our mouth is. That's one of the things that we really need to do. Now, in this regard, I think that we can probably borrow from some of the signals that are being sent in the northeastern part of the island. So many of us may recall that a couple years ago, we had the Northeast Tobago declared as a managed biosphere reserve. Now, of course, that is something good for us, right? But it places a significant responsibility on us to really manage going forward and stuff, right? But one of the things that we have done is that we have really been attempting to work collaboratively and so on, right? To the extent that in the context of the management of the reserve, one of the things that we have done with the support of the Tobago House of Assembly and with the support of some international agencies like the Inter-American Development Bank, is that we have developed a proposal for a trust to manage the reserve as opposed to having a state agency manage the reserve. And the proposal is for the trust to have membership from civil society, membership from the private sector, and of course membership from the state sector. What is also quite interesting is the composition of that, because normally you may say, okay, fine, we're going to have some people from the civil society like Jerry, you may have from the private sector and so on, and it's really two of them. One from civil society, one from private sector, and 10 away from the government, right? That is not the proposed composition. The proposed composition essentially sort of ensures that the civil society members and the private sector members, they essentially outnumber the state, the membership from state agencies. So I think that the proposal is about three from civil society, 3 from the private sector, 4 from government. So coming together, essentially what you have is 6-4, outnumbering government, right? So government essentially doesn't have the opportunity to dominate the conversation and dominate the decisions that are made, right? And again, that is something I think is quite progressive, and it represents a significant departure from the way we really used to do things, and really give the agencies and give the stakeholders outside of government a significant voice in really making decisions and shaping policy, shaping plans, and so on. That's really going to affect their own socioeconomic development. Yeah. Right. So Barry, this is, I think, another area that
and that point you made about the trust. Yes, that trust being formed is a very interesting concept, and well, it's amazing that it's so advanced in terms of the northeast side, but yet we're still struggling to do something similar for the management of the Buccoo Reef, right?
Yeah, I think here, I mean, if we have organizations established, some of the reef operators, we have some fishing organizations and so on, and I really think that if we give them a full stake in the management of those resources that they actually depend on. I think that we'll see commitment as we have never really seen before. I think that's one of the things that we really need to do.
Yes, yes.
When we involve people, we need to involve them meaningfully. We need to involve them in a way where they are able to actually make decisions and so on that affect their own lives.
And actually, that's the idea we're trying to tease out, especially in this second part of the discussion. We'll hope to have here more, of that ideas, those kind of ideas. But joining me at this time, we have the professional Miss Alice Moy Mackenzie, who will be helping to moderate the forum. All right? So you'll hear from her in a bit. But I want to, just before we move on to the management issues, talk about some of the ecological importance of the reef. Why is all this, effort to conserve and so on? We have online Dr. Farlane Solomon, who is a fisheries scientist with the IMA. So can you provide for us, Dr. Farlane, some insights into the ecological importance of the Buccoo Reef Marine Park, particularly as it relates to your area in terms of fisheries? And you could even say how does the park management arrangement support sustainable fisheries practices and so on to contribute to the long-term viability of that sector?
Sure. So hi, good morning everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Okay, good. So, as we all know, fisheries, it's important to Tobago. It's a source of livelihood and sustenance. It contributes to food security, to livelihoods, poverty alleviation, culture, recreation, and tourism. Unfortunately, however, in Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of our commercially exploited species are either fully exploited or overfished. And the main benefit of an MPA such as the Buccoo Reef Management Park with regards to fisheries is really that, it supports stock management in a number of ways. Right? For example, reduced fishing pressure within an MPA allows harvested species to grow larger and to live longer. And the benefit of that is that larger, older fish actually produce more offspring than younger fish, right? And these offspring that's dispersed outside the MPA and are available for fishing. So this is what is known as the spillover effect, right? MPAs also support stock management by protecting critical habitats such as spawning ground, nursery areas, feeding areas. For example, the seagrass and the mangrove areas within the park are important nursery areas for lobster, conch, and other commercially exploited fish. Right? So there are many studies that have shown the benefits of marine protected areas to fisheries, and many of these studies have also shown that the economic benefits, such as increased revenues, greater fishery yields, and reduced effort-related costs, right, are realized a very far distance from MPAs, hundred of kilometers away from MPAs, right? It actually depends on target species. And so there are a couple of points that our presenters made this morning. For example, one of them had to do with regulations and enforcement. And in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, where we have very archaic fisheries laws and very little regulations and enforcement, things like MPAs, are really, the importance of MPAs are even, they're magnified more or less, right? So, in terms of fisheries, there are a lot of benefits, yeah? Assets?
Okay. Thank you. Testing. All right. Yes, thank you very much. And may I say, panelists, you can chime in. I mean, if there's a burning point you want to add on to or something like that, but very concise. And those online as well, you could indicate with your raised hand, and we'll acknowledge, right? So who we want to hear from next this morning?
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our panelists. Good morning to our guests. Thank you, Barry, for the introduction, and apologies for my late joining. I would like to invite to join the conversation at this time Mr. McFarlane, Mr. Gerald McFarlane, Director at the Buccoo Reef Trust, as we are on the topic of the management of the Buccoo Reef Marine Park and or other blue spaces. We'd like to hear from you your recommendations on the successful multi-stakeholder co-management arrangements that we can institute for the sustainable management of our blue resources.
Yeah, morning again. Really happy to be here again. I haven't been around a group of marine scientists, specialists, subject matter specialists, and people involved in the marine areas for a little while. And I'm quite pleased that I made a special effort to be here, although I was a little late. But very, very important exercise. And I've been part of many exercises like these in the past, over the past 30 or so years, since beginning the time when I was Secretary of Agriculture and had some responsibility for the environment. And it peeved me to see how the authorities or persons in charge with some aspect of managing or controlling our marine park sometimes display a level of, I don't want to say arrogance really, but a certain level of ineptitude, don't care too much. Over the years, you have seen this coming down. And that is one of the reasons in the early years why a group of us got together and say we'll form the Buccoo Reef Trust, and other groups form, people like Eric, and a number of marine related. I see my good friend here, Blacks, was coordinating with the efforts of the tour operators over the years. And Alfred, again, a marine specialist in his own way, marine surveyor. You know, so different people get on board, making a contribution over the years. And I'm not sure we're getting the kind of support that we need from the powers that be. I mean, government and assembly change over the years, and you'll see different approaches towards having a solution. Sometimes this thing is ignored and put on the back burner. I remember we as a Buccoo Reef Trust, we went about on our own establishing marine moorings for the reef moorings, and so on. And they went ahead and tell us, go and do it, we'll pay you back for it. We catch retail to give back the funding for it, but we did it in any case. So the point I'm making is that over the years, there have been many different genuine efforts, but it has not been sorry about this. Yeah, over the years, we have not seen the kind of support that is really needed in order to push the agenda for really getting the kind of structure to manage the reefs or marine parks on this island, particularly in Tobago. Mm-hmm. And you know, we just
okay. There's a little challenge with the phone there. It happens.
Yeah. So over the years, we have not seen the kind of effort and resources and interest pumped into a management structure that is ideal for the to managing our resources here in Tobago. I have been, and other people, I've witnessed how different structures were set up in different areas in the region. I could think of the Socioeconomic Marine Park management system, or how they approach it, using all the stakeholders involved to manage that area. I think in Belize, there's another approach, stakeholders again, where it was used to manage the marine areas, in particular, very sensitive marine areas. And so definitely, there's some merit to having the stakeholders do their duty, come up with systems and plans, and of course, it must be supported by government agencies and stakeholders and other stakeholders. To me, to make a long story short, we have seen people in the authorities, make kind of snide remarks about the marine areas, even simple things like in the reef, for example. There'll be people who will be setting turtle nets. It happens constantly over the years. You'll go to the police, you'll tell them about it, it will come to your information, to come to you. Bring the matter to the attention of the police, and the police have a little haphazard way in responding to that, because people say that they have an interest in that sort of thing. You'll hear comments from other people, government officials, talk about a few hairy crab in Buccoo, and that shouldn't prevent a development from taking place in Buccoo without the necessary standards and so on. And other comments, where people actually, people in authorities, security, part of the security apparatus, don't seem to deal with some of the complaints that we have. My solution to all of this is that we must have what you might call some well-established NGO with all the key stakeholders represented, and of course, a few government entities, so that you don't have the thing like what my good friend here spoke about earlier, where you have committees set up with the majority of the persons are representative of some government agencies, and the stakeholders, who are the real benefits and reap the benefits and contribute to their livelihood by practicing or operating in the area, don't have much of a say. They always influenced or overridden by these government agencies. So an NGO or an agency, like how the government set up the EMA, Environmental Management Authority, to look at management of the island or so over the years, and give it teeth, responsibility, and you pay consequences for when you breach it, And like the Institute of Marine Affairs, where they have studied and they can consult with and they study the marine areas in a specific way and could be and they are an important resource entity for the marine areas in this country. We need to set up in Tobago the kind of entity that is very robust, could stand up to government ineptitude and lack of concern and seriousness, point them out, and show that they need to be on board with any structure that we set up here in Tobago. Whether it could be an authority, whether it could be an agency, whether it has to be an entity. And all these resources that I've seen over the years seem to indicate a stakeholder, a majority stakeholder level of operation is what is key to the success of any management system for the marine areas here in Tobago. And there are quite a few that we can use the example. The Buccoo Reef Trust has done a number of studies over the years, studied the reef to its optimum, and still there's a lot of work to be done. And still I'm just saying there's another project coming up soon that a very ambitious project involving the Dutch company, to do something in terms of reef transformation on the reef. All these things could come to naught. All these efforts in the past could come to naught if we don't have a system where we can properly and effectively manage our marine environment, starting with the Buccoo Reef and starting to see what's happening afterwards, or maybe simultaneously with what's happening in Speyside and those serious dive sites, and what is happening to the most famous coral that you have in Speyside, that it's been deteriorated to the point where we at the Buccoo Reef have been asking some experts to look at it to see what could be done to prevent the deterioration of this huge coral. And there's some interesting things that is coming up, suggestions and recommendations that is coming up to deal with that. But I'm saying all of this to say that all our efforts, even this effort here today, which is so meaningful and so compassionate and show the interests of all these stakeholders, could come to naught if we don't put a structure in place where we can do serious management, monitoring, evaluation, and deal with people who breach whatever structure or recommendations or systems that we put in place. We have to ensure that the police, the Coast Guard, and the authorities in the THA and in government understand the value that this place is contributing to people's livelihood generally. And we can't do this individual. Eric alone can't do it. The dive operators alone can't do it. The reef tour operators alone can't do it. We have to get together and put a proper structure together, a proper entity to ensure that this place is managed, all the systems and projects are evaluated, and see that whatever we put in place can redound to the proper, a conscious effort to make something work, to create a system that works, so that we're proud of it, not only for us today, but for the generations to come. That's my contribution to it.
Right, so emphasizing that multi-stakeholder co-management approach. Right? Now, if you realize the time running down fast, and we want to hear from as many as possible, at least all on the head table, on in-person table, right? So we have Mr. Alvin Douglas, my good friend, right? Tell us, and then we want to hear from Mr. Blacks as well as to what is happening on the, because these are guys in the thing on a daily basis. Now I see Dr. Juman had her hand up. I don't know if she can say what comment she had to say in very succinct, and then we go to Blacks and Douglas.
So I wanted to say that we've been having this conversation going all the way back when we had the Buccoo Reef Management Committee with regards to co-management, and what was said then and what still exists is that we need legislative reform in order to allow this co-management approach. The legislation, the draft Forestry and National Parks legislation would have allowed for that when we did the IFPAM-TT project, right? So that is something that, and the legislative reform is what takes forever. So that's something to consider. And even in terms of things like user fee, we spoke about user fee for a number of years. The concern was that the user fee goes into a consolidated fund, and we needed to have some sort of mechanism where money paid for the reef can be used for the reef. So again, you know, we could have these conversations, but unless we have the commitment to have the necessary legislative reform, we probably would be having these conversations another 20 years from now. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, that makes me to wonder about the trust idea that Linford spoke about, because that seems to be going ahead, but we'll see. So tell us, Big Doggy.
Morning, everybody. And earlier, one of the panelists made a point of the experts around the table. When it comes to the marine environment,
You live there.
I live there, but I don't consider myself an expert. In front of me, I'm seeing people here that also live there and are experts. So I think all of us are like-minded. So I'll be pretty brief on my presentation.
Yes. And just as you said that, I mean, persons here, if you need to say some burning thing you need to say, just stick your hand and we'll recognize you, right?
Just don't ask me no hard question like 9 times 8 and all kind of thing. All right, now, well, you guys, anybody who is in the marine environment knows who I am. My name is Alvin Douglas. I have a dive shop on the island for over 20 years. I'm the vice president of the Association of Tobago Dive Operators. I am also the director for Tobago Marine Safety and Security Services Limited. And like many of like the panelists, I am actually forced to be an environmentalist, because you have to be serious to work in the marine environment and not understand that you need to have some kind of measures put in place for conservation and preservation. Okay, but there's a balance that needs to be met. There's a balance that needs to be met. Okay, and what happens is that I want to lean towards the two suggestions. In fact, I actually envision it as an actual company, an entity separate from anything else. Very similar to the Heritage Park that manages this beautiful establishment and Stowe Bay. Okay, once you have an entity, then you'll have continuity, because what has been going on is that every time we have powers that be change, the policy change or it slows down. You know, the efforts change and slows down. We have had meetings in the past that you had fantastic ideas, but the ideas only go as far as the powers that be or the administration that be. There is no the effort or the enthusiasm is not there. It has to be driven by the people who actually use that environment. I am sure that the panelists will touch on the environmental aspect. I am sure that people are going to touch on the tourism aspect of it. But I think that I would like to reiterate how important the educational aspect of that Buccoo Reef, because Trinidad and Tobago's educational system does not allow our kids to go into the water, to explore the water. Now, the marine environment is our largest asset and is most important asset. All the villages and them lie on the coast. And you notice I stress a little bit about the Buccoo Reef, because the Buccoo Reef and Speyside is just the tip of the iceberg. We have to educate our citizens on the importance of our ecosystem, the uniqueness of our ecosystem. Just the other day, in fact, we just completed an initiative with TITAL, the association, the members of the association. Every once in a while, we host photojournalists, and they come and they take pictures of our environment. And in 20 years, I have not been in another environment. I have only been trying to keep my business in existence. So I rely on foreigners to come in and tell us, okay, where are we? I invite constructive criticism. What can we do to make it better, to make our product better? Yeah? And yesterday, we just finished with one of the photojournalists. And there was a reef called Mount Irvin. We call it Mount Irvin Wall. He dove on that reef and he said that reef holds one of the most balanced ecosystems he has ever been on. In his entire 40 years of photojournalism all over the world. Are we willing to lose that? Are we willing to give that, throw that away? And let me tell you something. How is that connected to the Buccoo Reef? The Buccoo Reef, the nursery of the Buccoo Reef feeds all these little reefs around. So it's very important. Me as a diver, we only pass through the Buccoo Reef. We don't dive on the Buccoo Reef. We pass through it. We might have a snorkeling trip, but all in all, we understand the value of the Buccoo Reef and how it is important to be managed properly. Education speaks to enforcement also, because if you educate our people, then it's going to be a level of enforcement, because you can shame people on making sure that they do the right thing. If everybody knows what the right thing is. I deal with people on land, they never go in the Buccoo Reef, they never go on it, because again, in Tobago, sea don't have no branch, and you have a monster, and you will get eaten on Easter Friday. There's a monster that will eat you. Don't go in the sea on Easter Friday. And I've heard that for the past 30 years. It's time that we educate our people on how to stay balanced in the ecosystem, how to understand the value of our environment, how to also sustain ourselves in the water. How many drowning that we're gonna people jumping, fishing on on the coast and falling into the water, you fall into the water, so what? You drown because you don't know how to handle yourself in a body of water. Okay? And we have thriving institutes like the Tobago YMCA that teaches people how to swim, how to handle themselves in that environment. Okay? It goes far beyond just managing that Buccoo Reef. It's the psyche of the Tobago people. We have to educate our Tobago people to think out of the box. Okay? Put it into the schools. Allow the schools to go back onto the Buccoo Reef so them understand what is the beauty of our ecosystem. I, as a dive shop, we host various schools from South Trinidad. We go down there, we teach them how to dive, and then we bring them in the dozens, in the hundreds to Tobago, because they understand that they need to go further than what our educational system affords us. And this is an opportunity for Tobago, because you know what? By far, our ecosystem, our marine ecosystem, is by far the most unique thing our country has. Yeah. Trinidad has nothing, so they do not understand, nothing when it comes to the marine eco balance. So they don't understand our plight. We have to do it, and we cannot hide because, okay, well, we don't have the legislation, we have to go parliament, we have this. Myself and Ricardo has been on panels for years, going through all these initiatives. But still yet, as a people here, we have to find a way to maximize on that little area called the Buccoo Reef. We have to find a way to do that. And I am 100% for having what you call it, a private,
multi-stakeholder,
multi-stakeholder. That is the way to go, because it speaks to continuity.
You spoke to the issue of law enforcement, and as soon as you said that, I saw Assistant Commissioner of Police put up his hand. Probably he wants to have a conversation with you. So we'll let the conversation take its natural course. Mr. Collis Hazel, right, you will come in and have that conversation. And I'd want Mr. Alfred as well to, put in his part there within this little sector here.
So thank you very much, Barry, for being a part of this very important panel discussion this morning. And I want to say how happy I am to be among this distinguished august body that is there to deal with our very precious gem that God has provided us with. I want to say from the onset that where the TTPS is, as it relates to this situation, we are cognizant of the fact that as a law enforcement agency responsible for law enforcement in Trinidad and Tobago, this is an area in which we do have interest in, and I want to boldly acclaim that as Tobagonian, I more understand it better than anyone else that will be responsible as the Assistant Commissioner with responsibility for Tobago and the Eastern Division, that I would like to really make this one of my memories in terms of ensuring that we do not just talk, but we put action, and we leave with we ensure that there is execution to this project to ensure that it is successful. Of course, my predecessor, Mr. Dillon, in his early career, worked tremendously on the whole idea of creating very early an opportunity whereby we can have some measure of dealing with access to this park. And therefore, what was required was management. And the police cannot be everywhere. I want to make that abundantly clear. And in looking at the whole concept of what is taking place here, we need moral persuasion alone cannot work. And clearly there has to be some level of, I concur with legislative issues that we will have as officers to work with in the parameters to ensure that we execute and bring success to this issue. Like anything else, I give my commitment that there are some discussions that we would like to see. The police service has now a riverine unit. I know the former THA would have provided 2 vessels to the police. And we are at this point in time trying to see how best we can have these vessels up and working in the water so that we can lend our assistance to this issue in terms of patrolling the marine park and ensuring that we bring a section of the unit from the riverine unit into Tobago where we can provide that assistance. However, we need the legislation in which we can be stern enough. But more than that, while we have the legislation that deals with the park, we also need with that to deal with the ugly picture of how our access to the park and how we treat with that ugly situation where with the tour guiding facility where it is really a terrible sight to behold, in which persons have to acquire tickets or entry into that park. This is something that definitely needs to be organized in a better structured way.
Agreed.
And of course, we were embarrassed like anybody else in terms of what we saw on television. I know that it's a matter before the court as well, where we are actually fighting before tourists in order to get these things up and running. So I just want to say here that the TTPS really wants to be a part of this whole initiative and to lend our support in terms of ensuring that we can treat with it, because I can say to you proudly that it also, we are cognizant of the fact of the misuse of the park and the damage that it is causing. And of course, while we are doing that, there are areas in which we have interests in terms of our mangroves and some of those other areas where it is quite noticeable that it's an area for transshipment of drugs and firearms. So clearly we have interest in those areas. And of course, we would really like to see the whole idea of being involved and to be part of the management process in ensuring that we get this right. I concur with all the others. I've been to Belize 28 years now, and for my birthday, and had the opportunity to see that operation of that park in Belize. Why can't we have it here in this beautiful island of Tobago? I thank you, and I give you the commitment that we are prepared and ready to work, and we would want to be part of this multi-discipline team that will bring success to this initiative.
Yeah. Well, I'm very heartened to hear your passion, Mr. Hazel. Yes. And on the note of collaboration, I mean, just this week, right, the director and this other staff within the department, we were planning to have discussions with you as pertaining or continued collaborative or joint surveillance on the reef for upcoming peak season. So we'll talk on that. So I'm very happy to hear you talking in that light. And we have, I would mention that we have some of our reef patrol guys here who collaborate with the police service and the Coast Guard and maritime services and so on in trying to maintain law and order. I think they deserve a little round of applause, right, for the work that they do. Thank you. And so, keeping in line with that same discourse, we have on panel here in person, Mr. Ricardo Alfred, who is a maritime surveyor and plays a serious role in terms of, that law enforcement arrangement as it pertains to the marine space. So we want to hear from him, his perspective on the conversation.
Yeah, so good morning to all. Right, so my name is Ricardo Alfred. Today I sit as the maritime surveyor, basically responsible for ensuring the seaworthiness of these vessels. Like my colleague said, Mr. Douglas, we have been on several of these committees, several of these meetings, and yet today there's no result. Let me just deal strictly with the law enforcement side. Every time in the past, there was an assistant commissioner of police. It's either to spend 2 months or 3 months or 1 year, and then you have to start over the process. It is very tiring. It is very exhausting that you have to go through this process every single time there's a new assistant commissioner of police. I am not sure how long Mr. Hazel have at this post, but I just want to highlight a few things. What the police officers can do. If you look at the Summary Offence Act that speaks to number 38, it says very clearly, a constable may board a vessel. If you look at the Summaries Act number 49, violent language and breach of peace. If you look at the Summary Act 65, it speaks about annoyance in the street to annoyance or danger or residents or passengers. They're definitely speaking about vessels here. If you look at the Summary Act 70, it speaks to public nuisance. If you look at the Motor Launch Act, it speaks about persons operating a vessel that is not duly licensed, and anybody who is guilty of it is guilty of an offense. It speaks to persons who are operating with a larger number than what they are duly licensed for. It is too long that we keep talking about this. It is very, very exhausting. There's a lot of squares in wrong holes. For this thing to go forward, each authority have to be serious. When you call Coast Guard, they have no vessel. I don't know how much more longer this type of exercise can continue, but I have received numerous threats. The police is aware of it. The Reef Patrol people have received numerous threats. The police are aware of it. When will we get serious? I mean, there's so much laws, there's so much legislation out there that exists to deal with this issue. This is a simple issue. It's not difficult. The marine park is not even a lake, it's a little pond. You can actually see everything that is happening. It is very exhausting. I can't even say how much time I'm saying that it is exhausting. For this thing to work, we have to get serious. I know Mr. Hazel. I think he's a person of great character. I'm hoping that he's going to be there for a number of years so that we can definitely enforce some of these issues. I remember one time I was on a committee and we were going to remove some seagrass. Moments before, the day before the actual operation started, it was cancelled by an administrator. This shows a lack of persons not having confidence in certain administration, certain authorities, and it cannot work. Personally, I have put so much measures in place to protect myself and my family, which is costing me monthly in terms of the numerous threats. I know the patrol guys receive so much. It's beyond, talking about.
Assistant Commissioner hand is up. Probably wants to engage you on something there. So
yes.
Go ahead quickly. Mr. Hazel.
Thank you very much for your discourse. I would want to say that as it relates to those issues, what the police would be hamstring about in terms of all that you are talking about, you would realize that we require that resource in order to get on the sea as well. We just spoke about the fact that we were provided with 2 pirogues. Well, I'm not certain, I don't think it's pirogues, that is not seaworthy. We have had discussions where we are trying at this present time in order to get those vessels to take to Trinidad, so that we can, I was in discussion with the United States Ambassador, Mrs. Bond, in terms of asking for some assistance by way in which we can have those vessels up to some level of readiness, so that we can be able to provide them to our riverine unit in order to assist us, in order to treat with that. But as you are well aware, we do not have the resource in order to, perhaps the Tobago House of Assembly in its wisdom can partner a memorandum of understanding in buying proper vessels for us so that we can be able to get in the sea and to treat with the situation as it is. As it relates to my tenure, I would want to say that very proud and brave, I want to be the Commissioner of Police. So, like anything else, I do not hold myself to an assistant commissioner, and elevation is what everyone's look forward to in life, passionately. So, the time that I'm here, I am going to give my utmost best as Tobagonian first in order to ensure that we achieve this success.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, you comment, but I want to bring Mr. Blacks into the conversation and as an operator, and of course you can engage with him, Mr. Alfred, as pertaining to the operations on the reef. I'm sure Mr. Black is witness to a lot of things that he's not satisfied with, right? And maybe you, Mr. Alfred, could talk to some of them. Let's hear from you, Mr. Black.
Pleasant good day. I'm Mr. Dexter Black, reef tour operator for the last 15 years. I've been to many of these symposiums and meetings at the tourism department as it relates to the Buccoo Reef. We have made some tractions with the MOU with Fisheries. I don't know where that is at present, because as we have changes in administration, you have different policies. And a lot of what is being said here is true, but there's also a lack of will and a lack of legislation as well. Mr. Alfred will have conducted a lot of exercises on the reef, and it's amazing. As soon as the authorities are gone, operators defer back to the same behavior.
Well, could you clarify? I mean, we all here are stakeholders. We probably know what you're talking about, but there are some viewers online and so on may not be aware of what are these infringements or things that you see on the reef that are not that you are not satisfied with. What are these activities? Could you, just for the sake of the viewer, describe some of them so we didn't know what you're talking about?
Right. The whole operation in general sets a tone for chaos and not a too good experience for the visitor. Everybody knows when you enter Store Bay, you are bombarded, right? You've been offered reef tours and anything else, right? The price structure, I mean, it's disparate. You could pay $50 to $150 and be on the same boat, right? That often causes dissatisfaction among some customers because they will come back and ask, how come I paid X and the person next to me paid Y. Right? There needs to be a proper fee structure to enter the marine park. Also, and the issue that Mr. Alfred, overcrowding of the vessels way beyond the capacity, and proper life-preserving equipment, right? We need to, manage that in an effective way. That all come down to the, management as well. On the ecological side, the parrotfish, which is important to the reef, that is still being poached through this very, very heritage park. The turtles, there's diverse, I wouldn't disclose the location, but there are a lot of leatherback turtles, green turtles, right there in the marine park, right? And, we need preservation and protection for the wildlife. Also, the seagrass is important to the turtles. The turtles feed on the seagrass, right? So it's a whole ecosystem that needs management, and it's a symbiotic relation. And there's also, we live off the beauty of the reef. We live off of that. That's our livelihood.
Well, would you say in terms of, you pointed out some things there, the overloading and so on. Maybe you could add to that. Well, what is the view in terms of the noise levels perhaps? Right? I go on the reef and sometimes it's very noisy, like, competing DJs out there and so on. What is your view of that? And in terms of how could we improve the situation on the reef as a tourism product, in terms of maybe managing the space, spatial planning, where certain activities could happen in this place, where it cannot happen in the next place. Bathers can bathe here, vessels can't pass here, a part designated only for research, those kind of things. Is that something that that reef operators see in a positive way in terms of spatial management of the reef? And right after that, I want to hear from Miss, name slipping me, Yakub, yes. Miss Yakub, in terms of talking about the tourism, the Buccoo Reef Marine Park as a tourism product, right? So, just comment on that quickly and we'll
Well, it goes back to the multi-sectorial approach, where we get all the fishermen involved, the reef operators. You sensitize and educate people. Perhaps you'll get a better cooperation if they understand what their impact or their activity, how it impacts the marine life. It all has to do with education.
Okay.
Right? And I want to touch on one thing. There were people re-registering their vessels because you have people just putting people on their boats and they're on the reef, giving a tour. Well, they have the opportunity to re-register their vessels from TFT to TL, where they get the proper equipment, the proper survey. I mean, nobody's preventing anybody from doing their economic activity, but there's a process with the permit and all of that.
Yes.
The transit permit and the operational permit.
Well, certainly there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done, and but you got to start somewhere, right? So, but Ricardo, you just wanted to say something very quickly, and then we go to
yes. Right. So this is just for persons to understand that, especially from the Mr. Hazel, from his standpoint, a vessel is not required right now in terms of what is required to deal with the issue. In the past, we have had many talks. We went as far as to the DPP office to write up the charges that is supposed to how to charge persons, because the comment that came from the police at the time that they didn't know how to charge person regarding these offenses. The DPP office had actually made a template that was available at the Crown Point police station, and I would like to pay kudos to WPC Allen, who was actually one of the first officers to actually charge someone with overloading. And to Ms. Sterling and Sergeant Sterling, well, I believe Inspector now, these were key persons who are well aware. Even the legal person at the police service, Mr. Ford, we would have gone through numerous things that can be done. It cannot be that every time a holiday is coming up, you have a battalion of police and army and coast guard coming down, and then after that,
well, that calls for
it can't be.
Exactly, and this is why we're having this conversation, to put a structure, or as McFarlane would have said, an entity in place that will be consistent and constant, and it's on, right? Now, the challenge for a moderator is always, in terms of managing the time. We're already at 11 o'clock, with 1 hour to go, and yet we have few persons to hear from. Right? So going forward, we ask that, make it concise, and we see how much we can get in. I'm pretty sure, I see someone in the audience burning to make a point, right? We get to you. We had intended for a break, but I think we all agree that we can skip the break and just go the hour, right? And complete the discussion, right? So Buccoo Reef as a tourism product, how could we get there? And online, Dr. Anjani, she was asked to bring a perspective in terms of case studies where this thing is working properly in terms of marine protected areas or marine parks, where it's working well as a tourism product, right? So she could probably chime in within this discussion here. Ms. Yakub.
Good morning, everyone. I'm hoping everyone hearing me. Mrs. Lovelace, you have changed my entire portfolio this morning.
Okay.
I am a product development and destination officer with the Division of Tourism, not a product development expert, but I am sitting with the experts around me now. Excuse why my voice is sounding very shaky. I'm actually very cold.
Okay.
Right? Now, tourism has been having a lot of use of what we would call marine, and we utilize a lot of our ecosystems for a lot of our tourism products. Now, we've all had the marine park issues, and I've spoken to Eric and Mr. Blacksay, and we've all tried to put a system in place for the Buccoo Reef. We've tried the taxi type system where, one boat fills, we put in another boat and that kind of thing. We've tried several systems. They work for a while and then they just fall apart, right? Now, in using the Buccoo Reef, I know we had the trust trying to do some replanting of polyps and those things to encourage more growth and expansion. In addition to that, I would prefer to see a lot more, not on the reef itself so that the reef could regenerate, but to have other initiatives and other marine interests per se, because Bloody Bay, we have the seine fishing that encourages the tourists to come to see that. Everybody gets a little fish, whatever. And we want to encourage not only just reef tours and diving and these things. We want to encourage new initiatives, aquaculture and all these things to go with it, right? As Mr. Douglas had initially stated, education is the key, and we need to start from young. Now, on Tuesday, the 4-H club would have inducted over 300 new students as part of their club. We have a lot of clubs in Tobago. And I think we could encourage to have a marine club at the schools. We have experts in all our fields right here that could encourage some form of that. So people would learn, especially you live on an island and you can't swim. That's important. It is something that we can encourage students at different levels of schools, whether from preschool, even to adulthood. It's never too late to learn, right? But we always try to encourage safety wherever we try to go, and we always try to encourage people that littering is not the way. We've had several talks, we've encouraged persons, we go into the schools, we talk about the littering, and even adults do it. I even had a gentleman curse me when I told him about throwing his food box in the garbage bin provided. No. Right, so tourism is an integral part of the island of Tobago, and we want to try to have some sort of communication and community leadership. We have a lot of people on the panel who are, as I said, are experts in their field, and we as tourism, we would support wherever we can, whether it's a new initiative, whether it's something that we've been trying with the management of the Buccoo Reef Park for a long time, and we would like to get that finalized, and with the, I guess, with the encouragement of IMA, Mr. Douglas, all these fine people of you sitting here, we can move forward for sure.
All right. So we're into the last hour of the discussion. All right, I saw someone in the audience that you want to make a point, right? Right, if, Douglas, if you could give her, is there a mic that she could have? Right, so she'll make her contribution, and then we'll segue into the final hour of the discussion where we want to really home in on the crux of why we're here, right? And we'll start that off with Dr. Ganes, who will bring some perspectives in terms of how proper park management happens in other places within the region, and why are they successful at it? What can we learn? What are the best practices we can take? And what I would like henceforth going forward in the discussion, and we try to bring in some of the other online panelists like Mr. Watke and Patricia Turpin and so on, in terms of what is the next step? What are the actionable items that we can take from this discussion as to getting closer to resembling one of the best practice or case studies that we will hear about, right? So go ahead, identify yourself, and then, yeah, I think it's on, we hear, just, okay. Oh, it's not on? There's a mic? No, well, you have to hear, for those online to hear you, you have to use the mic. Or you could just use this one. You use this one from the head table, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, just run it to her, big doggy.
One. All right, yes.
Okay.
Yes. 1, 2.
All right, you have it.
There is a clipping circulating on social media concerning the parrotfish. Now, is it legally or by law that no one is allowed, like the turtle ban, the parrotfish ban?
No, well,
legally,
I know, well, just to quickly answer that, no, that's not an accurate thing that's circulating there. There's no law yet.
Wow. Set in place, so
no.
You could afford to buy it,
yes,
consume it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next one. I've sit here and, again, a little deja vu. And yours, let me say the panel, because all they're addressing them as the panel. The panel have been sitting on numerous occasions to come up with protecting the Buccoo Reef, protecting the social and the economical, and taking back in the ancient days where the Bible, the written scripture, could never be wrong because it's the word of God. And he said that anything that he has made is unclean, is for us to eat and live off of it. Now, yes, there is a misuse of it. And we, sitting here in this room, divers, fisher folks, stakeholders like myself who's selling the gun rubbers to you all to go and dive, we are the one sitting here trying to fix the problem that we create. Because way back in the days, my grandfather days, they dive in, and we didn't see long down the road that where we would have been endangered, where you could go on the reef, walk on the reef. I work in hotels where tourists had pieces of fans, corals, and at the end of the day, a solution, trying to fix it, we bring the outside entities to tell us how to fix our problem, which is, as Mr. Douglas said, knowledge is power. The guys that Mr. Blake talked that is standing outside, hustling, laws need to be set properly in place, and not just laws to tell them come off, you know. Fine or confine, the seriousness of it, and then you'll see, because it's like a Western tongue, it's lawless here.
Right.
And for us to preserve something, a proper enforced structure must be set in place. Proper
And that's what we want to,
penalties.
right.
Not just run them out and the patrol run and knock them off. As you're there, you get a
Indeed,
stiff
I get what you're
penalties.
saying, and we need to get organized.
Exactly.
But I
Thank
think
you.
somebody want to respond to something you said there in the front. Just identify yourself quickly and make your point. The same mic, where the mic is, yeah. Keep it tight. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. It is on a slightly different topic that I would like to speak about, right?
Okay.
I'm representing these four gentlemen here, four of us. My name is Jamie Story, and I'm representing the fly fishing community that we have on the island. Now, it's a sensitive topic that I would like to speak about, obviously. I think it's a good time to bring it up because we just spoke about a tourism product development and so on. Fly fishing has been going on in the marine park for decades, you know, based on catch and release fishing. Now, before I get to my question, I would like to highlight other marine parks in our region. So Belize was mentioned as one of them. There's Los Roques in Venezuela, which is also a Ramsar site. There's Bonaire, there is Cuba. So all of these marine parks have two things in common. They're very well managed, you know, as we could see. They have their priorities straight. And they also all offer the sport fishing and catch and release programs. So in Belize, for example, you have zones where the recreational sport fishing is allowed. And it's a huge tourism business in these islands. You know, there have been extensive studies with the Bonefish and Tarpon Trust and so on the economic value that it brings to these islands, and especially like the Bahamas and so on. So we know that there's a no fishing policy across the board in the park right now. And what we are here today to bring is we would like to get involved, you know, form a guide program where you have licensed guides who can fish within the park and carry tourists out there and pay a fishing license fee. And of course, this is going to go towards the park in terms of a revenue stream. And we would also like to play an integral part in policing the park. Let's call it the neighborhood watch. Now, fly fishing, for example, is generally done in the morning hours in the park. From the hours, let's say, between 6 to 10. This is a crucial time in the park when Reef Patrol might not be out. You have us out there now who we can form like a hotline to the police service and whoever. And if we see illegal fishing or conking going on, you know, we could be a response team to that.
Yes.
You know, and so my question is, going forward, can we be considered in terms of getting together and meeting to really discuss more in depth what we could bring to the tourism product as well as the park in its sense?
So that's one actionable item there that we need to have a discussion with the fly fishing sector, right? And you made a very important point there because I'm always of the view that the best police for the park are the users, right? And if everybody's educated and knows the benefit that the park and keeping the integrity, the ecological integrity of the park intact, how it benefits them, they will show interest in maintaining the park and so on, right? And you made some very good references, again, which segues nicely into Dr. Anjani's presentation. Anjani, I always mess up her name, Ganesh, she'll correct me, right? So come on and tell us about these case studies as
Jamie would have pointed out some already. Yeah?
Thanks, Barry. Can you hear me? I'm just checking.
Yes, we're hearing you good.
All right, brilliant. So thanks for the introduction. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. Today was my favorite. And I really enjoy studying and working with everybody in Tobago. So just to give a brief background, and I know Barry, you might be a little disappointed in my approach, but I think I'm going to talk about a lot of the needs drawn from examples in the Caribbean, rather than I'll give one or two specific examples,
yes,
but it's sort
ahead.
of a collective understanding based on my research and recent experience in the last couple of years. So my background is in coral reef ecology, which is essentially the understanding of the coral's relationship with the environment, right? And as you know, globally, that relationship with the environment includes a lot of human activities which alter the environments for the reefs. And it's sort of, well, when I returned home, I'm working with the Institute of Marine Affairs, and so it's understanding how we can use management to maintain a healthy relationship with the environment for coral reefs so that we can continue to benefit from it. What I've realized that over the last few years, when you're looking at the scope of management for marine areas, there are a number of information and guidelines online for effective management. You can do a simple Google search and you'll get the top 3, which is like from NOAA, WWF, from ICRI, which is the International Coral Reef Initiative. Those are a few examples of guidelines for effective management. But what I also found from a lot of the discussions that I've had at regional levels and with working groups on actions like biodiversity and marine protection is that in order for a lot of these management plans to go through, there are a couple assumptions that have to happen, or there are a couple foundational things that need to be put in place to make it work. And so that's what I want to talk about a little bit. Firstly, there's collective action, or collective agreement, rather, that there needs to be marine management, and there is a collective understanding of the vision of what that marine park looks like, right? So there must be agreed understanding of what Buccoo Reef would provide us and how we service the marine park in a way that can continue with these specific functions or services, right? There are about 6 other foundational elements or resources that we do need for effective marine park management. So a few of these were spoken about in discussions, and it's been a very good and informative discussion. I'm always learning. The first one is essentially governance, and I'm not going to talk about this because it is a topic that we've discussed about for a very long time, and that is in the form of legislation, policies, plans, and enforcement, right? But when you want to talk about co-management, where there's no top-down, you might think that this is going to be more stewardship, right? Stewardship in which you have a community structure or an island structure or management structure that would have guidelines for marine protection and marine management. The second one is political will, right? So or in this scenario, community will, right? We need to prioritize and drive action at all levels to come up with decision makers. And you need people to have that as a priority. When you think about the government of Trinidad and Tobago, we can count on one hand what are the priorities, the political priorities of government, right? And crime is a huge issue. Job security is a huge issue, development, and those often take the forefront. We need to be able to connect the dots and connect how ocean issues and the MPA issues relate to these issues at the broader scale. The third foundational element that I think a lot of people have spoken about from marine park managers from other countries are access to research and technology. So tools for effective management. And what I found in the last few years is that we have enormous opportunity for access to tools and building capacity to use these tools but we don't have the capacity for long-term planning. So when you're thinking about marine park management, you think about tools for surveillance, tools for monitoring, tools for managing, tools to get the job done, right? And I has had personal experiences in trying to manage tools for monitoring for coral bleaching and whatnot, and not having the sustainable finance to support these technologies. And that's the fourth major point, right? So finance to support the system sustainably for the long term, right? The fifth one is awareness. And I think Dougie spoke about it. It was touched upon in terms of tourism, but you need awareness at all levels, right? So it's not general awareness. The public needs specific focal awareness that directs to specific focal groups of decision makers, resource users, the community. And then with that, you must have inclusion. And again, that brings you back to, you know, having that co-management process is where you have inclusion of all parties from the beginning, and having it in an iterative process where we learn from perspectives. With co-management, you must be able to sort of share responsibilities, right? So you have an area, you have limited resources, you work between community, government, NGOs, and research to be able to figure out who plays what role and how you can work together to solve problems. And I think problem solving and innovation is key there, right? So we spoke about things like governance, that we need legislation stuff, but we also need to think outside the box of, you know, if we don't get legislation, right, how can we work around the system to be able to be effective in our management? And there are a lot of case studies here in Trinidad and Tobago as well that have proven successful. So if you think about Natura and Grand Riviere and the turtle protection, there was a lot of community work done for many, many years before turtles were actually declared an ESS. And so we need to always have a problem-solving mindset. We need to be able to focus our resources and prioritize. So I'm not saying that if we don't have any of these 6 foundational elements, we can't do anything. We need to focus and prioritize what we're going to start with, because you don't want to spread yourselves thin, right? So one example is, I'm bringing Belize back into the discussion because it's the starring today, is the Glover's Reef Marine Protected Area in Belize, right? So just connecting to the foundational needs and how that has led to success, right? So just to give you an orientation, this Glover's Reef is about 350 kilometers square in size, so just slightly bigger than Tobago. Well, not slightly, 50 square kilometers bigger than Tobago in area. It is a key, which means that if you imagine Tobago is an island, you remove the middle of Tobago, it's essentially a thin line of land that is surrounded by coral reefs on both sides. It's a huge marine area, which was established in 1993. It was a World Heritage Site in 1996. And there are restrictions to fishing, which are enforced. There's marine spatial planning, there's donations, and then there's a team, a reserve manager, park rangers that sort of carry out certain things. So there is governance, there's a level of legislation and enforcement. In terms of sustainable finance, they've partnered with local fisherfolk, but also with international NGOs like Wildlife Conservation Society, as well as private sector, right? Private sector needs to be brought into the conversation from the start. And so they get their financial support through government and through all these external and cross-sector partners. With respect to inclusion and awareness, you have things like the management is supported by the fishery community because they have the awareness and the understanding and of the benefits, but also they are involved in this thing in terms of understanding fish life cycle and contributing to highlighting where the spawning grounds are so that they know that they can be protected for sustainable fisheries outside of the marine protected area, right? There's support from stakeholders. Belize has a huge tourism sector. In terms of research and technology, at the site, there's a research station that helps and assists in monitoring research, and it's also utilized by universities abroad, which brings in funding and again assists with that sustainable finance. And with respect to Belize on the whole, a lot of the monitoring is actually being propelled and done by an NGO called Healthy Reefs, who created the Reef Health Index, which has traction throughout the Caribbean, and it is a metric that IMA uses. So that's just the start the conversation of like the foundational needs and the focusing of priorities. Just to reiterate, the vision has to be built from a lot of the key stakeholders, and it is a compromising vision that is inclusive of multiple perspectives, and we need to be very problem solving in our thinking and moving forward. So if we can't get some things done, how do we try other strategies? So that's just my initial input. Happy to discuss more.
Well, I appreciate how you've been able to distill the necessary ingredients if we are to succeed at, establishing some sort of multi-stakeholder co-management entity. Right? I didn't capture all of them, but governance, the political will, some financing mechanism, awareness. We have to determine what the priorities are, since we can't work on everything at the same time. Inclusivity, of stakeholders and so on. And we also have on Zoom, Mr. Alyosha Watke, right, who is very experienced, the CEO of ERIC. From your experience, Alyosha, what are the elements? Could you chime in and tell us what are the elements you think and strategies for successful stakeholder co-management arrangements? And I know you were very integral in setting up the trust that Linford Will has spoken of earlier. So I know you have some ideas. Let's hear. We're not hearing you yet. I don't know.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you now.
Okay. Okay, great. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me, and I would like to just quickly go back to two items that were mentioned before. Just some comments. The first one is the Marine Park bill, unfortunately, is not a bill just for the Buccoo Marine Park. It's also for other areas in Tobago. I have commented on this. I don't think that this bill is applicable to the rest of Tobago, especially not for the planned marine protected area in Northeast Tobago. So it might be applicable for the Buccoo Reef area, but not necessarily for all marine protected areas or marine parks planned for Tobago. The second comment goes directly into your question, Barry. So it was formerly called TRUST. The organization that is supposed to implement the Man in the Biosphere program in Tobago is called the Tobago Biosphere Management Alliance. And that already speaks to one of the aspects as you spoke, that you're asking me about. What are the strategies? And the word alliance already includes one of the strategies. And Linford mentioned this. It is the full participation and inclusion of private sector, non-governmental sector, and the government. Now, the word participation is something that we have used for years and years and years, and it's such a nice word, but the issue with this that project managers and implementers have a problem with participation because participation takes time and costs money. And often, the government agencies or the international donors that provide money for activities that we are doing in this respect do not have the time and money to really allow for full participation, because participation means that we are able to intelligibly communicate. And intelligibly communicate means we empower through our communication that all the stakeholders, the civil society and the private sector, that they really are able to know and make decisions. And we had so many meetings and workshops and whatever, and we have stakeholders there whose livelihood depends on the decision they are making in these decisions, in these meetings, but they have no means of informing themselves in an understandable way what they are making a decision about, because the people don't have the time to read 200-page reports. The people cannot, how do you communicate the complexity? And nobody takes the time to sit with people and explain to them actually what it is about and what are the implications. And in this way, in most of these discussions, people are led by experts or so-called experts or people that have a loud mouth. But in principle, true participation is not happening if we do not take the time and effort to inform people properly about the consequences of their decisions. So that is the first part of participatory management. It takes double the time, but it also, if successfully done, brings double the benefits. The second part is really transparency. We suffer, Caribbean-wide and Tobago is no exemption, from intransparent management, and any kind of management for the Buccoo Reef Trust has to be as transparent as possible. Everybody has to have the access to information, has to have access and understand the governance structures that are there. If people feel that they're talked over or that there are things hiding behind complicated clauses, they will lose interest, which is understandable. One very important aspect to successful co-management is valuing the time of the people that are participating. And I am saying this since the IFPAM time, since the last 10 years. We cannot expect private sector or the NGO sector to take part in meetings over meetings without compensating people accordingly. If you have governmental persons taking part, it is they're doing this during their work time. This is why all these meetings are during the week. They're never on a Saturday or a Sunday because that is not paid time, right? And I see Anshani laughing. I mean, that is the point. It is always between working times of people that are anyhow paid to participate. We from the NGO sector or the private sector, anytime we are taking part in these meetings, we are taking away time from creating income or implementing projects. And if I would participate in each meeting that I'm invited to, Eric would not exist because we would not make any money because I would just talk. And that is for every fisherman the same issue. Every time a fisherman comes to a meeting, they are losing their day catch. So we have to be willing to afford a certain level of compensation for people that are participating. And the TOBIMA, the Tobago Biosphere Management Alliance, will provide these kind of stipends to everybody that is taking part in the decision-making process. And I'm not repeating the important aspects that Anjani already mentioned. One thing that is very important is conflict resolution. We are, any society has conflicts, and when we use natural resources that are thought for everybody to be free and freely available, and the ocean has historically is a free available resource, there will be and must be conflict between stakeholders. And a proper structure for how do we deal with these conflicts, how can we mediate without creating bad blood, is integral to a good co-management arrangement, because co-managers will have conflicts. And again, the Biosphere Management Alliance will have special structures that will deal with conflict resolution on an organizational level. Having said this, with most of you, the information about the Tobago Biosphere Management Alliance has been shared already. And if anybody wants to have information, please feel free to contact Linford Beckles or myself. We will share this with you. As more people know about it, as better it is. As well as this structure might give quite interesting aspects to or ideas for the management of the Buccoo Marine Park. It is not directly applicable, obviously, but it can provide some interesting ideas. Most importantly, and this goes a little bit more to the roles of the NGOs, it provides a structure that is internationally acceptable for funders that look for international best practice and good governance. And Anjani mentioned this already. Good governance is the most important part for a successful management system. But it also has to be accepted by international funders, and they look for very specific elements that most of our NGOs in Trinidad and Tobago do not have, because the level is quite high. These things were developed for the Alliance and can be translated and be used for Buccoo Reef. Now, regarding the role of NGOs and other partners, I think it's, if you want to define the role or look at the roles of NGOs in this co-management arrangements, we have also to look, first to look at the role of government. And the role of government, the most important part is we have to start to understand that the government is a facilitator and a policy maker. It is not an implementer. And the agencies are supposed to support initiatives on the ground and collaborate and implement together with NGOs. In the moment the government tries to micromanage, it will not be successful. I know this is very tempting in smaller societies, in small environments, and whether this is Tobago or whether it's a village in the Alps, or it doesn't matter, it's always the same issue. The smaller it gets, as more government wants to get involved. And there's often a problem, because then decision-making gets very, very complicated. The government always should remain, obviously, the overall managing authority, because the government is the societal organization that is continuous. It will never cease. While NGOs, etc., can cease to exist, and then you have a problem. So this is why, for example, there is no trust, which originally was thought to get a legal responsibility for protected areas in Northeast Tobago, and this would have created a lot of problems if the trust would discontinue. But NGOs really can help. Number one, and we spoke about this with Mr. Hazel, resources, not that we don't have the resources to implement. And NGOs can create resources that the government doesn't have access to. A good NGO sector can attract national, international, regional and international funding that the government cannot have, and this is why Tobima also is there to bring additional funding in to implement those resources. NGOs can work as the eyes and ears on the community side. They can create a communication feedback loop, understanding what are our direct beneficiaries really, what are they interested in, how do they react, what are their problems and issues, and how can we do this in a much less biased way than governmental agencies can do. And last but not least, I would like to mention one citation from the Biosphere Guideline. That, hello? This is my last sentence. I just would like to mention one citation that I read in the guidelines for management, biosphere management reserves, that really impressed me. And that citation was the main role of a natural park or natural park manager, conservation area manager, is not to think about how they can finance the organization that manages it, but how can they create sustainable economic benefits for the people that live in and around the area. Because only if we create these kind of benefits, the people, businesses, and everybody will buy in. And after that, everything comes. Once people buy in, the politics will buy in. And once politics buy in, then we can go further. So I rest my case there. Thank you. Okay. I hope I didn't overtake my time.
That was good, and some crucial points you raised there. The one that point stuck out to me most, that government should act as a facilitator and not so much as the implementer. Right? Is that, you have a point? Okay, so we have one question in the audience, and we have Ryan Manet as well. So we'll take the one in the audience here first, and then Ryan, you jump in quickly.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So let's start this question by saying it is better to be unborn than untaught, because ignorance is the root of all misfortune. So I have a question about the Flying Fish Association in front. As a reef patroller, we are accustomed to deterring people from using that marine park for any type of fishing. So I'm just curious, I'm trying not to be ignorant, I'm trying to get the information as best as possible. So I would like to get the information concerning where is it designated fly fish area? What is the specific time allotted for such fly fishing operations? And how are we, the reef patrol officers, to distinguish fly fishing folk from regular poachers? And how will the public respond to us telling them that the removal of flora and fauna from this area is illegal while allowing fly fishing to take place in the said area?
A big question, man. You have a response that could fit into 30 seconds? Try your best. But that sounds like a part of the actionable items that to a larger discussion between, you know, that sector and to tell us how it could work. But 30 seconds, give us all your best. Give it your best shot. The mic on? Okay. You have another mic, you could give it to him quickly?
Hello. All right.
Right, good.
Okay, so to answer some of your questions, well, fly fishing is separate from other types of fishing. First of all, we're not taking anything from the reef. It's catch and release, okay? There are guidelines in terms of handling the fish, so the fish are protected and released safely. And the designated zones that I personally would recommend is on the nylon pool area itself. On the low tide, these fish come up to feed there. We're targeting two main species of fish only, is the bonefish and the permit. So some of you will not know what that is, but these are the sports fish that people really come here to fish for in terms of fly fishing. A fly fisherman is very easy to distinguish between a regular poacher. Fly fishing, I like to call it the golf of the fishing world, because it's not something that anybody could just pick up and do. It takes years of practice. It's a casting ability, it's an art form that you're developing, and we're fishing with barbless hooks. So the fish are not actually seriously injured as opposed to other fishing. Another key point is that we're only targeting these species. How we do this is that we are guiding the clientele, and it's only when we see the fish in shallow water that we're making a cast to the fish. So there's no bycatch. We're not catching barracuda, snapper, and anything else. We're only targeting that specific fish, right? So it's not like you throw a piece of bait in the water and whatever comes along is going to eat it, right? So it's a very selective form of fishing. So the areas, like I said, that I would zone as these areas would be, one mainly is that area on top of the flats where the reef boats themselves go as well. Fly fishing is a very low impact sport. You know, we're going to go out there with maybe 2 persons. We're trying to be as quiet as possible and as least invasive as possible. Now you compare that, let's say, to a reef boat with 50 people walking around the same area that we want to fish, okay? And we would like to be there in the morning, period. Because as soon as the reef boats come, the fish are gone. I would like to highlight that. But they come back.
Okay.
So, to summarize it, that is a key area where we would fish.
Okay.
I would say no fishing in the mangroves. The mangroves should be totally off limits to fishing. And again, the target species that we would go for are not going to be any mangroves anyhow.
Okay.
Right, so hopefully that helps.
Is that a fair response? And of course, you see the need for a larger discussion, right? So that's something, well, Esther there is taking notes as to what are some of these actionable items that we can have going forward. Mr. Manet is Director of Species, right? One of the panelists. I missed him earlier. I didn't see him on. Probably my fault, right? But come in, Ryan, and make your concise contribution.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Yeah, my internet was giving trouble earlier, so I kept dropping off. So I just wanted to emphasize what Alyosha spoke to earlier regarding how the park should be managed. And I agree with him and make two very quick points. Effective management should be one, science-based, and two, free of political interference. So yes, the government is responsible for the overall governance of it and overall management, but political interference where, depending on which way the wind blows, policies change, should not directly affect management of the marine park, because if the science says, then you can go with the science. But if a political entity decides we like fishing this species and we should allow it to happen, that is not effective management. Guide the management and let it stay independent of whichever way the political wind blows. And, yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. Nice and concise. And now we're wrapping up, right? But we have two very distinguished persons we haven't heard from yet. That's Dr. Potts and Pat Turpin, two veterans in the game. And then we have some persons in-house wanting to make some contributions. So I'll let it run. I'll take Dr. Potts first, and then Patricia Turpin will make their contributions, right? I know, Dr. Potts, you're a man of many words, right? Cut it in half for us, let's say you.
Good, I think it's still morning, fortunately. Good morning to all members of the panel there, and good morning to Trinidad and Tobago and whoever is listening. Let me just say, it's a really interesting symposium, something that, and that's why I listened a lot, because I've been involved with this fisheries in Tobago for a reasonably long time. As fisheries officer, I had responsibility for the Tobago department before it became a Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries. In fact, I named it that, and I was the first director who did that. And we did set up the Marine Park, and of course, that was headed by a Marine Park manager prior to my coming, and he was there with me, Mr. Shim. And then we continued to take care of business until up to recent time. And so I was listening a lot to gather as much as I can without interfering in anybody's talk. But let me I want to focus quickly without telling you too much more. You guys know a lot of what's going on in Tobago. I've heard a lot from a lot of people, older people on the scene and new ones. But I want to focus more specifically on what Barry asked me to treat with. He gave me two areas to treat with. One has to do with the recent socioeconomic research work that UTT has been doing there with one of our graduate students on the Buccoo Reef Marine Park. And he wanted me to say what are the key findings and recommendations regarding marine spatial planning. All right, so I'm going to say a little bit about that. Yes. And also he wanted me to speak a little bit to some technology that to treat with drones and how the use of drone technology could help with our marine spatial planning, and see if we could talk about this with more specificity to Buccoo Reef. All right, so I just want to hail some special people just before I move on. Mr. Gerald McFarlane was there, a very important gentleman who I worked with very closely as an advisor to his Buccoo Reef Marine program. He has been a real good stalwart from secretary to now, and I really want us to recognize him. Very important man. Barry himself did his master's thesis with me and has been a really great inspiration over the years. All right, so and of course, Dougie, who has also been helping me even in my own program. So I am at UTT these days, guys, and I'm in charge of the Marine Sciences program down in Chaguaramas. So what is marine spatial planning? A lot of people might say, what is that? And instead of me telling you what I think it is, I'll tell you what UNESCO thinks. UNESCO defines marine spatial planning as a public process of analyzing and allocating the spatial and temporal distribution of human activities in marine areas to achieve ecological, economic and social objectives that usually have been specified through the political process. Characteristics of marine spatial planning include ecosystem-based, area-based, integrated, adaptive, strategic, and participatory. Very important. That's the UNESCO definition. And to move quickly along, marine spatial planning is not an end to itself, but a practical way to create and establish a more rational use of marine space and interactions among its uses to balance demands for development with the need to protect the environment and to deliver social and economic outcomes in an open and planned way. All these words were being used this morning by different persons about balance and about development and about everything to do with people getting some little piece of the pie of the marine park and so on. But marine spatial planning creates a blueprint for ocean use and conservation by bringing together diverse users of the ocean, and you know all the different people who congregate there in that area to do something and make money, creating a comprehensive picture of that area, providing a forum for proactive discussion and informed decision making, providing a coordinated way to allocate marine species to simultaneously achieve ecological, economic, and social goals, and increasing transparency and accountability by giving all ocean users a seat at the table and common access to tools and information. All that you people talk about in different ways, and I'm sure people recognize that all this thing about sharing the space is really about marine spatial planning. Might be a big word, MSP, big acronym, sorry, but it's simply what we do in terms of sharing the space for economic, social, and other reasons. Recently, our own Siobhan Peters, right, and in her paper of Peters et al. In 2023, have done some really good work and she was guided, of course, by our Dr. Ria Guppy from UTT, right, to conduct on this Buccoo Reef thing, things about the socioeconomic aspects of the Buccoo Reef Marine Park and about marine spatial planning for managing the park. Now, this study focused on obtaining stakeholder perspectives on socioeconomic activities, conflicts, which Alyosha talked a little bit about just now, and Ryan, and the need for MSP for the park. Now, some of the key findings that came out of Siobhan's work, which, as I said, was supervised by Dr. Guppy, Dinesh Ram Sawak, and myself, he got some key findings, and about 4 or 5 of them. She identified the main stakeholder groups that utilize that Buccoo Reef Marine Park. She did that, and she said there are mainly tour operators, visitors, and marine resource managers, right? She talked about the main socioeconomic activities that take place in the park. He said that the main socioeconomic activity that took place in the park includes structured tours, and those are the reef tours that a number of guys spoke about this morning. Snorkeling, of course, water sports, which you all spoke about, both motorized and non-motorized. Fishing, including the fly fishing, of course. Poaching, scientific research, we have IMA in the house, and recreational uses, right? And Dinesh remind me to make the point that at least 10 major socioeconomic activities occurs in that park, and Siobhan was able to pull that out in her research. Now, stakeholder perception on conflict in the park was studied, and there's some really serious issues with respect to conflicts with jet skis. People think that is a predominant major issue that need to be dealt with. Conflicts with reef tour operators, and we spoke about that this morning, about competing for customers. Mr. Black made the point about that, and other persons make the point about that reach all in the court, fighting for space, fighting for customers, and of course, conflicts with poachers. Our study was able to pull that out. Now, stakeholders' perspective on the need for an MSP for the Buccoo Reef Marine Park. Now, the visitors and the marine resource managers were in support of the MSP, as indicated in their responses on our Likert scale. However, the tour operators were not in full support of a marine spatial plan. Why is that? We do not know yet, but it does require some additional work with them to find out what is happening there and if it's requires education, maybe that needs to be done. And those are the main things she found, but a couple other things that we noticed was that the study suggests that socioeconomic assessment is a critical step in designing the marine spatial plan that will be supported by the stakeholders. And it also indicated that many users, stakeholders, were aware of the user and activity conflicts and the breaches of the rules. So it was not like there's any ignorance of that. People are aware of what they're not supposed to do, but they still do it and so on. They also know the rules, but they still break the law. Okay? So the marine spatial plan has been recommended for the Buccoo Reef Marine Park since 1995 IMA management plan, and is still needed up to now to reduce these user conflicts we talk about and encourage safety, to protect critical ecological areas, and we know what they are in that Buccoo Reef Marine area. Remember, people talk about it in different ways. That tri-complex is the mangroves, the seagrass beds, the coral reefs themselves, and the general environment, right, to facilitate better management of the socioeconomic activities that will go on there, and as a means to better monitor the occurrence of prohibited activities. So this marine spatial plan is a very important thing, and we really want to encourage that. I could say more about it, but I don't have the time, as you all know. So I want to just shift quickly to the second aspect of Barry's request of me. And he said, how can the implementation of advanced technologies like drone surveillance enhance the effectiveness of marine spatial planning within the Buccoo Reef Marine Park? So I don't know, people, you know about drone. I'm sorry people know a little bit about drone, but what about this whole drone concept that is there now? Brand new thing for us. The US military been using it long before that. But this whole drone refers to any aerial vehicle that receives remote commands, right? From a pilot or relies on software for autonomous flight. Many drones display features like cameras for collecting visual data and propellers for stabilizing their flight patterns. So it's really something that is controlled, has cameras that can take it. Now, drone surveillance, more specifically what we've been doing, can significantly enhance marine spatial planning within the Buccoo Reef Marine Park by providing improved data and insights. And we have found literally that there are 6 specific ways that this can be done. I'll just speak about these 6 and then I'll pause so if there's any questions or any additional concerns. So the first one is data collection. So we have been using the drones, a number, Siobhan used it, a number of our master's students have used it for their thesis, including Javan Job, who now works in Tobago with a shell fisheries project, and a number of other master students. Now these drones equipped with various sensors, such as cameras, as I mentioned just now, multispectral scanners, and thermal imaging devices. Now they can capture high resolution imagery and collect diverse data from the park itself. Now this kind of data can include information about physical characteristics in the environment, such as water quality, temperature, turbidity, and of course, we could also, we could detect the presence and behavior of marine species. Now, habitat mapping is a second important thing for drones. Drones can create detailed maps of the marine park, the Buccoo Reef Marine Park, including the seafloor topography, coral reefs, the sea grass beds, and we hear that some people are coral reef specialists. They could use that for what they're doing, and other critical habitats. Now, the information aids in identifying and delineating areas of ecological importance and helps the planners, right, the marine park planners, to understand the distribution and extent of the different habitats within the marine park. Now, thirdly, biodiversity monitoring. Now, these drones can be employed to conduct regular surveys, right, and monitor the marine species within the protected area, which could help in a serious way to cut down the work or assist the work of the marine park rangers, right? And we have those, and that's a different conversation which I wanted to weigh in on, because I did supervise some marine park rangers over the years in Tobago there, and I know of some of those serious things that maybe I'll get a chance to talk to Mr. Otley about, and of course the commissioner. Now they can capture aerial footage and imagery of marine mammals, seabirds, and other wildlife, enabling the researchers to plan, right, to assess the population sizes and migration patterns if that is required, and the overall health of the ecosystem. Now, the data can inform decisions regarding conservation measures and of course zoning, which is a word that I've been bandied about this morning, because this whole thing about spatial planning is literally about zoning. It's an important part. That's what basically we're talking about. Now, the fourth point of the six I'm talking about is illegal activity detection. Drones equipped with real-time video transmission capabilities can detect and monitor illegal activities within the park, such as unauthorized fishing, poaching, and pollution, and so on. The ability to quickly identify and respond to such activities enhances the enforcement efforts, right? And respond to such activities, and the response to such activities enhances the enforcement efforts, I said, and protects integrity of the protected area. Number 5, the rapid response and emergency management. That's another important aspect. Now, in the case of emergencies such as oil spills, and I remember years ago as a young fella, a ship did come aground on the reef there. I never eat so much baked beans in my life, but it was good for the local people getting those things, but the effect on the reef was not good, right? We had a number of issues there. And the marine, other marine accidents, we have to look out for that. Drones can be deployed to assess the extent of the damage and to provide real-time information to emergency response teams like TEMA. Now, this enables prompt and effective decision-making to mitigate the impact on the marine environment. And the sixth point is public awareness and education. Big Doggy talked a lot about that this morning, the real importance of education. He emphasized that, right? And Alvin really, he got that one right. Now, drone footage and imagery can be used to create compelling visual content, such as documentaries and interactive virtual tours to raise public awareness about the marine park. These educational materials can promote understanding, of course, appreciation, and support for conservation efforts, while also facilitating stakeholder engagement in the marine spatial planning process. So in summary, by leveraging the capability of drone surveillance, marine spatial planning within the Buccoo Reef Marine Park can benefit from enhanced data collection, improved monitoring, better enforcement, and informed decision-making. Ultimately, this contributes to more effective conservation and sustainable management of the marine park and the marine environment. These two technologies, the marine spatial planning technology and the drone technology, they are used in countless MPAs in the region, while Tobago is far behind in the use of the technology, and of course, we need to do it to help enhance our management. In the face of climate change, of course, and sea level rise issues and so on, Tobago must lead this charge in zoning its marine space to facilitate the socioeconomic activities, of course, livelihoods, and of course, to promote environmental protection. I want to pause here, Barry, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to our people today about these issues. And of course, I know you wish you had more time, because there are a number of other things I could have weighed in on, but not today.
And it's very good to see you, man. Very good to see you.
Very good to be invited. And I thank you guys very much, and a pleasant good morning to all my people there.
Yes, yes. Where are you now? I think you told me you're outside somewhere.
Yes, I am actually attending a leadership conference today in San Juan.
All right.
But I jumped on the opportunity to take a few hours off.
Thank you very much.
You, Barry, no problem. Yeah, you're welcome.
Right. And, well, he made commentary on a very important study on the socioeconomic dimensions of Buccoo Reef. But I would have read this study, and it really jumped out to me in terms of that whole issue of zoning and the management of space, that the operators were not so much in support of it. This is why earlier, Mr. Blacks, I tried to play devil's advocate in asking if you were, in support of some of these ideas you're hearing in terms of managing space and so on. But we're wrapping up, right? And I know the bellies are maybe beginning to, make you aware of that it's lunchtime, right? We have food there. But we want to hear from Ms. Turpin. But just before Ms. Turpin, I saw Sean McCoon from Environment Tobago came in a little bit after. I don't know if you want to say a quick just a greeting. Well, like he jumped out already. Okay. So Ms. Turpin, yes, I know you have been an advocate for this multi-stakeholder approach or co-management approach. What are your recommendations? Can you sum it up for us in terms of what do you see as some actionable steps that we can take here on in the near future to go in that direction?
Wow, Barry, you've given me a hard job.
I know you're capable.
You can put on the camera if you wish.
Well, you will have to do it on your end. I'm not sure we can. Can we do it on our end? The camera, can you turn it on from your end?
I'm trying to do it.
Okay. It would be nice to see you, but if you get in trouble, you could just go ahead. I think most people know what you look like, although they haven't seen you in a while, I guess.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm here. Okay, I'm talking to you from home, so there's likely to be a lot of noise every now and then.
No problem.
Anyhow, having listened to what everybody had to say, I have to tell you that I feel as though I'm living in the Wild West, because every day brings an issue. Every day brings an issue of sharing and understanding, and this is where we are at. I believe that there are steps that can be taken. I am not working for the government or anybody that I'm beholden to, so I could make some statements that may or may not cause problems, but the whole problem with Buccoo Reef is the fact that the government interfered in a process that was taking place very nicely. We had a big management committee, a co-management committee called the Buccoo Reef Management Committee. I'm sure that Jerry McFarlane and everybody else who was on that committee can attest to the work that was done for years, together with the IMA and the EMA.
Like she's stuck. If you're hearing us, Pat, the audio-visual stuck a little bit.
I am. Okay,
Yeah, we're hearing you now. Well,
I'm
coming back
trying to
in.
get back. You're hearing me?
Yes, you could go ahead.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
What I said was, I don't know where I got stuck, so I will have to repeat. Years ago, when we were about to declare the Buccoo Reef Park, and it's the lagoon area into an ESA, the Secretary of the Environment, 2 weeks before it was to be declared and designated as such an area, put a stop to it. As you can imagine, after years of work, that had a devastating effect on the committee. We had already done a work plan. We had already supported the IMA in renewing the management plans for the park, and we were getting ready to try and raise funds, and all of a sudden, bam, that put us back about 10 years. Everybody was frustrated, and the management committee folded because they felt that the government was interfering in what was a very successful co-management exercise. So, pointing to the future, I believe that you have an example right here now with Northeast Tobago and the biosphere. You can use that example as the type of organization that needs to be created to manage the marine park. It has all the things that are needed and is exactly what Jerry McFarlane was alluding to. I see no reason why it cannot be copied. and made into a successful plan for that particular area. Then again, going back to what Rahana Juman said, all the legislative things need to be put in place immediately. That's the second step, first or second step, whichever way you want to go. But we have to have the buy-in of the community, and the only way to do it is through spatial planning. And I totally agree with Arthur Potts. That is the way to go. You have to do this. It has to be zoned, and the laws have to be laid out clearly for everyone to understand. Then they have to be educated and spoken to about their needs on a one-to-one basis. It cannot be assumed that everybody understands what is going on. They haven't got the slightest idea. Okay, and I've discovered that over and over and over again working in the environment in Tobago. So, I don't know if I have supplied any recommendation as worth going forward with, but I think that all of my esteemed colleagues on these panels have come up with enough for us to be able to draw down on, and especially when it relates to tourism. Tourism, we need to know what we are promoting. We can't just be telling people that we have the most wonderful environment in the world. Everybody who comes here can see it with their own eyes. We have to protect it. I tend to be a protectionist. So, I mean, I can be quite annoyed when I see things going on, but there's nobody to fall back on when you see something going wrong. So, my hope is that the various divisions in the House of Assembly will hire enough people in the Fisheries Division, as well as in Natural Resources, so that when we call on them, or we need them, that we don't have to be worried about them ever turning up. And another thing that people will need to be clear on is the laws. What are the environmental laws already in place that can be supported by the police and enforced? This has to happen. It's an old argument. It's 25 years old. Nobody enforces the law. So this is all I have to say on the matter. I will help however I can, but I think that a good model would be to follow what is happening in Northeast Tobago. Okay, and Linford Beckles is the very man to spearhead this, together with the Fisheries Division. Okay. And as a reminder of what Alyosha said, the NGOs are the people who are on the ground. They know what is going on, they know what people need, and that is the way you have to approach it. You can't come there with big stick and expect people to like it. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Barry.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Pat. All right, so there we heard
You're welcome.
some good wisdom. All right, Mr. McFarlane, I think you wanted to chime in there. A good time. And, well, after Mr. McFarlane, we'll take 1 and 2 points. I think Dr. Juman wanted to say something as well. But just make it brief. And anybody in the audience? Right, Mr. Hector, anybody else? You, right, Akwi. Right, so we run it down like this. Mr. McFarlane, Dr. Juman, Mr. Hector Akwi, and then Esther will just summarize our day's events, and we'll have the vote of thanks.
Yeah, quickly, and I must say again, what a resourceful and and talented and group that we have around us, and some getting in online as well. But I want to suggest a way forward. And we could easily get carried away by the amount of contributions, and even the quality of the contributions that people are making. But we need to have an idea of a way forward, in my view. And as I said before, I alone can't do it, or the Buccoo Reef Trust alone can't do it. We have to do it together. But I'm just suggesting a format. One, we have to decide what we want to do, what we are going to establish, whether it's a committee or an agency or some authority to deal with this challenge that we have. And whether we're going to have an entity that's going to deal with the Buccoo Reef marine area, the area that is protected by law, or we're going to deal with all the critical marine areas, and there are quite a few, especially when you have to take into account the 52 dive sites that we have identified. Barry, you remember, when we had the Buccoo Reef Trust, we identified 52 dive sites around this island. My partner here will also know that. So I'm saying technology is becoming so critical, and while it will take a longer time to do all these things and to put all these areas or identify them, we need to say exactly what we want to do, what this committee or group will be doing, right? And I will suggest that we take all the important marine areas into consideration. Because in the long run, what I'm proposing is that there will be an amendment to the Marine Areas and Enhancement Act. Right. And I think that is where we could get all the authority and who doing what, and whether we're going to call ourselves the Marine Areas Authority of Tobago or something like that, and have that embedded in the act. So that is what I think we come to in the end. Yeah. But we have to get a background and a history of these issues and how long we've been pursuing it, and put it into some perspective. Because before we go to government or the THA, whatever we want to establish, we have to have the full history and the issues that we're dealing with, in order to make sure that we're dealing with everybody and we have consensus and we have people making the inputs. So that calls for a critical consensus building process with all the stakeholders.
Yeah, analysis of the stakeholders and engagement.
Yeah. So after we do that now, we have to get I think we attempted it at the Buccoo Reef, so sorry for saying this all the time, but the Buccoo Reef did a lot of work. We need to have a socioeconomic value of these areas that we want to protect or we want to be concerned about. Barry, you remember we did
economic valuation.
A coral reef valuation with Loretta Burke, I think from the World Conservation something.
Resource Institute. World
Resource Institute, that's right. And at that time, it was some 200 million US annually that she valued the reef, the marine areas, and all the economic inputs and the value that these things bring to the economy of Tobago. That have to be part of this preparation, this body of work that we had to undertake, right? We have to do this value of the socio-economic value of the marine areas and consult with the stakeholders to do this as well. We can't just do it all by ourselves. We can't just sit down as a group and say we're looking at this thing and we're making recommendations. This has to be done after serious and meaningful conservation. Dr. Potts touched on a point that I have here in terms of using drones and so on to do surveys. You know, we did that again by when we the survey of marine areas and the Buccoo Reef. And we had this fellow, Dr. Brian Lapointe, you know, at the University of Miami, I think he was. Oh no.
Harbor Branch, I think.
Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute in Miami. And that could be done much faster now. Even though he used LiDAR system or the LiDAR software at the time, the LiDAR software is even much more sophisticated to do that in quicker time. So we need to do this survey, the value, the socio-economic value of the marine areas, including, if not all, most of those 52 dive sites that we're talking about, that I mentioned earlier. We have to say where these dive sites are, because some people may confuse, like if you go up to Speyside, they may confuse washing machine with bookends or Japanese gardens, or, you know, we have to be very specific where those areas are in terms of what we're talking about, because we're going to have this land, this whole project, and we're going to approach government and the THA to amend the Marine Areas Act to include all these areas, and we have to be specific where these areas are and what they are called and the limitations of these areas, right? And so we have to do this survey, we have to use the science, technology that is available. We talk about LIDAR that Dr. Potts talked about earlier. We're looking at using special systems to do reef transplantation. What we're going to use? Steel, we're going to use concrete. What type of concrete are we going to be used? Concrete with fiberglass and this sort of thing in it, you know, so that something could last longer, could take rough seas, or if that time happened, if it fall, it ain't gonna break or mash up. You know, we have to look at all that sort of technology. We have to look at, for example, we asked a scientist to look at the coral, the big coral in Speyside, for example. How are we going to repair that? Are we going to just sit back and allow it to deteriorate, whether it's the parrotfish or whatever eating it, or there is some disease or some coral disease that is affecting it and weakening it, and that is estimated to be more than 300 years old? You know, we have to do and look at the appropriate technology to build back something or kind of patch it, for the want of a better word, to let it look something close to what it was a few years ago. Coming that now, so we're coming now to the question of, we have to look at financing this. Who are we going to get finance from to do this? All this body of work. It's not a simple thing where a few people get together, as I said earlier. We had to get some maybe experts or subject matter specialists to bring in, to give this thing some value and importance. So whoever we speak to, we must know we have done our work, we have done the research, we're fully aware what has to be done, we're fully aware of the problems, and that will help us to move away from where we are accustomed going. We lament the problems. We're taking the issue forward with developing solutions to the problems that we're having. And all this, when we develop, we have ideas about certain agencies that we could approach to help finance this very important exercise that we're doing, or we propose to do. And from this will come some recommendations coming out of all of this, some key recommendations, what we should tackle, what we should give priority to, and that sort of thing. And then coming down to what I started off earlier, based on all these recommendations, we go to some solicitor who good at drafting regulations and bills to take to Parliament, or we take it first to the government and say, listen, this is what we have, this is what we're going to do, and this is the amendment that we're suggesting to go before Parliament or go before Cabinet or the THA Executive Council. This is what we're approaching. We want to be an entity or have an entity. I don't have to be in it. We don't know who's going to be part of it. But be an entity with some authority. So when we put down rules and guidelines and so on, anybody in breach, we could know. We don't have to find out if the police will take action. We do want to know if somebody going to get some turtle and they're not going to be charged or something like that. You know, we have to get the thing real, and we have to realize where the structure and the kind of organization or management system that we're going to adopt going to work, and so on. So it is extremely important that these, and I'm sure these are not all the areas to be considered. People here have resources and things. I mean, my good friend here, Alfred, could talk about how we could survey and do those areas and so on, how we could provide proper systems for monitoring what's going on the reef in terms of how capable these boats are. Presently, there are people going on the reef over more than what they're supposed to go with. There are people going on the reef, boats, tour operators, going there with 6, what do you call them, life jackets. If something happened to these people and you're out there, the boat's sinking, you have 6 life jackets and sometimes 50 people on board the boat. more than what they cater to carry. Let us don't wait for another disaster to happen. We're already embarrassed by what happened with the cruise ship recently. People fighting, embarrass the whole world, embarrass us here in Tobago, and up to now, it ain't gone before the court. Up to now, in spite of what Hazel just said, in spite of what the ACP said, up to now, the matter has not reached court. I'm challenging him on that. Up to now, I spoke to a senior officer and I was told that. Up to now, it has not reached the court. We can't sit down and wait until people embarrass us, and embarrass us. It's time for us to take concerted, serious action as we move forward here. And that's my closing comment.
Oh, very passionate. Right? So, Mr. Hector, like your father, man, fine thought. Oh, Dr. Juman, Dr. Juman is there still? I didn't see her. All right, so you go ahead, Carl. She left, so you go ahead.
My name is Carl Hector. First, I want to identify and recognize a stalwart and a man who had tremendous input in the marine or the whole environment and tourism. Sorry that we couldn't really have him online here today, Mr. George Stanley Beard. The environment is not a matter of opinion. It's a concern for each and every one of us. And one of our downfall as a people, we are too deceitful unless where it matters personally. All right? Where the reef is concerned, I did a lot of diving and work and thing on the reef. And the last time I been there, a couple of years ago, the most I could identify with is a couple of Russes swimming around, seemingly hungry. Okay? To me, the reef is in a really deplorable state, and we had to find some way of recuperating it. I don't know how it will be done, but as my thinking goes, the biggest thing is the stakeholders. Okay? Another thing I've been looking at is the input that the NGOs used to have. Buccoo Reef Trust, Environment Tobago. These NGOs was really effective and impacting on our society educationally, physical inputs, and plenty other areas otherwise. And over time, they have become eroded and weakened for reasons I wouldn't really like to say, as I see it. All right? Because I can understand how the Department of Natural Resources and the Environment could be taken and put in the same house as works. Could never. That is a different entity totally. And from since that time to now, the whole department have weakened. No enforcement, no monitoring, no nothing. And the only thing I could come up with is because of violations. People want to violate without any monitoring and evaluation and that kind of thing. All right? It have a lot more things where that is concerned, where the whole environment is concerned, because that is my life. Right? And I definitely think you can't really study that. To understand the environment, you have to live it. You have to live in it. Because changes happen so often. Somebody might come and study something for all time, and they go on their way. And by the time they go on their way, they might write up something on that, and initially that changed. So to really understand the environment as far as I'm concerned, you have to live in it. All right? I really want to be too long, because like we press for time too, and I really beginning to get hungry too.
You're true.
So hopefully,
we all.
The Division of Fisheries will come with another
there'll be more opportunities to flesh out, those
Plenty,
ideas.
plenty.
So we'll wrap up the evening with a young person, Mr. Seth Acqui, a student of the Reef. Let's hear what you have to contribute.
So, as he said, my name is Seth Acqui. I am a third-year marine science student, and over the last year, I have either led or been involved in 3 different projects in the Bonaccord Lagoon area. And by and large, I've been in the environment every week for the last year. And I was able to come up with 3 different issues that I saw. And, this entire symposium, I realized that it has been focused on how you all want to manage the marine park in the distant future. But what I want to know is what plans are in place to deal with these issues now? The first issue that I came up with is the actual garbage pollution. When you're going into Gibson Jetty, where a lot of tourists go to access the reef tours, you smell the garbage and you just see people piling up garbage in the corner there. The second issue that I came up with is the actual runoff from the land. I noticed that more recently, someone has placed a pipe there that would be putting fresh water into the nursery environment. Some of these organisms, these juvenile organisms, are very sensitive to salinity changes and that sort of thing. What is being done where that is concerned? And the third issue is the actual metal pollution in the water. When you dive in the water, you notice engine blocks and that sort of thing there. What is being done to remove those things in the immediate future?
Okay, so you were asking some tough questions there, in terms of what what is being done now to solve all of these problems. Well, I can tell you very little in terms of the resources that are available and so on. And so this is what the discussion is about. How can we fix the present state of affairs, right? And we're seeking innovation and so on. Now, we're wrapping up, and so Esther, are you doing it from here, or are you going to this stage? You do it from here, right? And I just wanted to point out, and I'll thank everybody after, but I just wanted to comment on Environment Tobago. I know the president did send his regrets. He was to be one of the panelists, but he could not make it because of other engagements. I saw Sean McCoon, who's the manager there, just came in. I don't know if you just want to say a greeting on behalf of Environment Tobago as we transition to the summary, right? And maybe Esther, I hope that you'd have identified some actionable things that we can say, what next? Makun, are you there? And if not, we'll just move on to the... Okay.
Hello again, everyone. So at this point in time, I will list some of the highlights from today's discussions. All right, so today's discussions would have supported some of the following, which Barry continually term as actionable items. All right, and the first that I have here is the need for a collective agreement and understanding of the services that the marine park can provide and how it can adequately be managed. There is also need for legislative reform that was mentioned by a number of the panelists this morning. A number of panelists also identified the need for an entity, whatever that entity is. The entity needs to be established with a specific mandate and the appropriate authority. So yes, we have a mandate and the appropriate authority. in a co-management arrangement for management of the country's only marine protected area as well as other associated marine ecosystems. And this entity, it was suggested that it not only be comprised of governmental organizations or agencies, but also non-governmental agencies. There is also the need for education and the capacity building of the general public as well as some of the stakeholders who utilize the marine ecosystems. And the capacity building and education should speak to ecosystem importance, the users and the need for reduction of user conflicts, identification of all the users, safety within and around the marine space. Person spoke about utilizing life jackets as well as the need for teaching our residents to swim. We are on an island, right? The issue of littering, enforcement of the legislations that are current as well as legislative reform. There was also mention of the government's need to facilitate the discussions and the enforcement. So yes, we heard the commitment of the ACP Hazel, and the local TTPS to assist in management of the marine resources. There is need for critical analysis of the stakeholders, the socioeconomic valuation of the marine areas, engagement in meaningful consultation, as well as utilization of science and technology. Mr. Manet spoke to the use of science and technology. Right? There is also need for the identification of financial resources, because yes, we can come around the table and have discussions, but there is need for finances in order to move these actionable items, to give the items action, Barry. Right? Finances are necessary. Right. There is need for proper enforcement. We said that already, as well as we need to, Mr. Ricardo, he spoke to the existing legislations, the Summary Offences Act. He spoke to which other, Mr. Ricardo? He spoke to the Motor Launches Act as well, right? There is need for zoning of the marine space. Dr. Potts spoke to marine spatial planning, which is considered the blueprint for ocean use based on the users and the resources that are available. There is need for a price structure, Mr. Dexter. There is need for a proper price structure as well as an association for the reef tour operators. Stakeholder consultation, right? Consideration to the contemporary issues such as climate change and associated impacts, along with the issue of marine invasive alien species such as the lionfish. Mr. Acqui spoke to garbage and other sources of pollution, right? I think I mentioned this before, Mr. Manet speaking to the importance of effective management, and this is driven by science and it should be free of political interference. Before I end, I have a poem that was penned by Mr. Carl Hector, and I think that it is fitting that it be presented. Yes. I think that it's fitting that it's presented before we close. And he titled the poem From Shore to Shore, from S-U-R-E to S-H-O-R-E. And it's short. It reads, from Tobago's shores where beauty meets the tide, I stand as a guardian with you side by side. With coral reefs adorned in vibrant hue, a precious ecosystem, both old and new. From gentle waves that kiss the sandy beach, to mighty currents that stretch and reach, I raise my voice on World Ocean Day to stand united, and with love we are ignited. Tobago, we must safeguard our ocean. Tobago, we must safeguard our ocean, for future generations need a portion. And the question is asked, dear ocean, will you remain blue? And what do you think is the answer? Ocean replies, yes, with the help of you. All right, so I wish that we give Mr. Hector a round of applause. He's here seated today. All right, so I invite Mr. Lovelace to wrap up today's events.
Yes, and I'll be quick. So I just want to thank everybody for participating in this rich discussion. I mean, when you're having a conversation, you never know which way it's going to go, right? And you never have enough time, to cover all issues. But as we said, there'll be follow-up to this. And I hope people would have given their contact and so forth, so that when we go at it again, it'll be easy to reach and so on. But I just want to thank individuals and organizations quickly. I'll do it in the same order I have it here. All right, Mr. Dougie, Alvin Douglas, Frontier Dive, and on behalf of the Dive Association, thanks. All right, Mr. Dexter Black, all right, in terms of the reef tour operators for participating. We have Mr. Gerald McFarlane, Buccoo Reef Trust. We have Mr. Linford Bettles, Department of the Environment, thank you. Ricardo Alfred, Maritime, Ministry of Transport, and in some ways TADCO as well. I want to thank you. Ms. Shariza Yakub, representing the Tourism Division. And we also have Mr. Alyosha Watke of Environmental Research Institute of Charlottesville. We had Dr. Ganes and Dr. Farnaz Solomon and Dr. Rahana Juman, all from the IMA. We also had Mr. Ryan Manet of Species. We had Acting Commissioner of Police, Mr. Collis Hazel, representing the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Right? And then we had Ms. Patricia Turpin, representing Tobago Alliance for Resilient Communities. Right? I don't think I left out anyone there, just making sure. But I also want to recognize in a special way Pigeon Point Heritage Park, who has been a worthy partner in hosting this symposium. Right? They would have foot some of the bill. We thank them very much. We got the place, free of charge. They decorated and so on. And we couldn't find a more fitting place to talk about ocean than by the ocean side in such a picturesque environment. So thank you very much, Pigeon Point, for partnering with us. I think we have one board member here today, Mr. Hector. All right? So also want to thank the staff of the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries, right, who would have worked hard in terms of helping us to prepare for this symposium and other events. We have the Reef Patrol officers here as well, those who do daily patrols of the reef. Thank them for coming and assisting in this event. And as I just mentioned, this symposium, the reason why we have it at this time was we wanted to have it within or proximity of World Ocean Day. And not only this symposium we had, in fact, this is a climax of several activities that we had. We'd have had about 3 beach cleanups. We cleaned up Kilgwin, we did Low Man's Land, we did Pigeon Point here in terms of cleanup, trying to engage some of the stakeholders as well in it. We also had the BioBits event, right, which was very successful, and they are soon to publish the findings. We would have helped in the marine survey there. We also would have collaborated with Species to take students out on field trips on the mangrove and on the reefs. And then we had a very interesting landfish event, right? I see some of the participants here. In fact, the victorious participant, Mr. Derek Chum, right? We were hoping to give your checks at this occasion right? But you know, sometimes we are a little slow at the THA in terms of processing stuff and so on. But that will, we're slow but sure, all right? And I guess all your other colleagues are listening. I know they are eager to get their prizes and so on, all right? So just bear with us, guys, right? And the landfish event, it was good. I think they caught over, the figure in my head is 230 heads, right? Weighing some near 200 pounds, right? When I calculated the at least retail value of their catch, it would have been somewhere in the vicinity of 6,000 TT at least, right? And so we're trying our best to control the population of the lionfish. And that event was so successful, and it had a good vibe about it, right? And we want to do it again. In fact, there are talks to have it as an annual event and even have it spread more regionally as a tourism attraction and so on. So there's, but one event I want to forecast, right, and this is in partnership with TATCO, I see the chairman here, right, coming up on the 30th of this month. Mark your calendars, because that's a day you'd want to turn down your pot and come to the food hub for a special edition Fish Friday. Right? TATCO has the usual Fish Friday every month. Right? They have been doing that since March. We thought it appropriate, World Ocean, celebrating Ocean Day, that we have a special edition Fish Friday on that day. And some of the catch, the landfish catch, Mr. Chong, from that, we will be serving it there, right? It promises to be very entertaining as well. It's food, it starts at 10 until, right? We're talking to the Department of Culture that they, it's heritage, right? So they could come and, nice up the place with some performances. Carl, the longer poem that you had, you could drop it there for us, right? And I imagine drumming and so on, and maybe some talents from within the department you'll see exposed on that event. So turn down your pots and support that seafood fair. Vendors will be there, everything seafood. So with that, I know that we are hungry. Right? It's close to 1. So thank you all for coming again. And until we do this another time, have a wonderful one. Thanks to Tobago Updates. Don't want to forget you. Right?